All right, everyone, welcome to the sixth class in the exploration of the meals of Shabbos, to have a deeper understanding, a godlier understanding of the great meals that we merit, the great spiritual lights and godliness that flows into our soul and into the world during each of the Shabbos meals. This is going to be the sixth class of a discourse that we're learning in the Sidur of the Alter Rebbe, Shneur Zalman of Liadi. There's a special Sidur with Chassidus. As we discussed, this discourse is divided into three parts. The first part deals with the Shabbos meals in general and emphasizes Friday night meal. The second part deals with the Shabbos day meal, and the third, and it also continues to talk about the general meals of Shabbos. And the third part deals with Seudas Shlishis, the third meal. We are at the conclusion of the second part because it's really one long discourse that is printed in the Sidur of the Alter Rebbe, the Sidur with Chassidus. It's printed in three compartments and three parts. Part number one is printed in the Friday night part of the Sidur. Part number two is printed after Shacharis, after the morning prayers. And you have part number two. And part number three is printed after Mincha. We're holding in the end of the discourse of part number two. And again, the way the discourse works is that the Alter Rebbe is quoting a Zohar, and he's actually giving commentary on the Zohar. There is a lot of Maimarim of the Alter Rebbe discourses that he said, in which he was explaining, according to Chassidus Chabad, he was explaining the Zohar. He was like kind of prying open the Zohar and giving us an understanding in the brilliant light that is hidden in the Zohar that otherwise we wouldn't understand. So I make this introduction because I highly recommend that if you really want to understand what we're talking about, it would be preferable to learn all the previous 5 classes, because we don't have the ability to explain so many of the other points, and he's going to be referencing some of these points as we're learning. I will do whatever I can a little bit to fill in so that there should be some understanding in today's class. But again, online on YouTube and on Facebook and on our website, you can find 5 classes, part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, called Shabbos Meals Unplugged. And that's where we're holding. And okay, so we are holding in the Maimer on page 592. Over here, you guys have copies. And we're holding by the words of Begin Kach Ikra Shabbos on page 592. That's the third paragraph, or maybe it's the fourth. It's the second time you have bold letters. Okay. So the main idea that we're building off is that in the last class that we learned last week, last 2 classes, part 4 and part 5, we had a major discussion of how Shabbos is different than the holidays. In both Shabbos and in the holidays, Shabbos and in Yom Tov, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, there is an enormous illumination. There's an enormous godly expansion that takes place, and there is what we call added mochen. There is an expansion of the mind. The cosmic mind expands, and there is what we might call brainstorming taking place in the cosmos. An enormous revelation of internal light. And we know there are 2 mochen. There's the moach of chachma, which is the right side of the brain, and there's the moach of bina, which is the left side of the brain. Moach of bina means the understanding, and chachma means wisdom. Now, on the holidays, there is an expanded energy of bina energy, and which means we have the capacity on the holidays for incredible comprehension and understanding of the divine that we don't have anywhere close during a regular weekday day. There's an enormous godly illumination that fills the world of Bina, the realm of Bina, with it's almost like Hashem's mind becomes filled with brilliant light. As a result of that, it vibrates through the entire cosmic order, that the creations also get expansive intelligence, and that we can understand and meditate on godliness and achieve in a meditation what we and experience in that meditation, what we can never experience in hundreds of years of meditation during a regular day. We will not achieve what we can experience on Yom Tov, on a holiday, because of this added infusion of light in the moach of Bina above. And Bina, when you have an expansive Bina, from there comes the opening of the emotions, because the emotions are the children of the Bina. Bina is called mother, comes the emotions, which means we have an incredible extra capacity for loving of God and fearing of God, the awe and the love that can become way intensified during the holiday. And primarily, Bina brings joy. When you understand and you have a rich understanding of something, you're filled with simcha and with joy. And that's why the regular Yomim Tovim, the regular holidays, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, are called Mo'adim L'Simcha. These are times of joy. And we also say the main root of joy is Bina, as it says, Eim Habanim Semecha. The mother of the children, she is joyous. That means that the Simcha comes from Bina. However, and this is important to know, this is what we discussed last week, there is a downside. The downside of the Bina and the consequential emotions coming from Bina is that since Bina means a grasp and an understanding, there's a certain presence of self, of somethingness. The understander, the one who's understanding, let's say it's us, or the angels above, or the souls even higher than angels in heaven, who experience an enormous expansiveness of understanding of the divine. Quietly in that understanding, there's a certain sense of self-realization, self-actualization. I feel myself too. I feel that I understand God. So it promotes the self. And in Chassidus, that's called yesh. Yesh means there's something there. So even though in the intellectual level, in the Bina itself, general intellect in general is not about the self. Intellect means I'm understanding its objectivity. I'm understanding a reality beyond myself, especially if that reality is God. I'm understanding something that's beyond myself. But since Bina means I am grasping, and if I'm not grasping, if there's no self, if you're not feeling it, that it fits into my mind, then you're not grasping. That's not grasping. Understanding means I have to get it. So there is an I there. So even though the I is very, very subtle, from that subtle I comes a more aggressive I. And what's that? The I of the emotions. Because in the emotions, when the emotions are born, which is the love of God or the fear of God, an emotion in general compared to intelligence has a much greater I. In other words, there's a thickening of the yesh, of the somethingness. I am loving you, God. So I feel myself in that even more. And that's why wherever there is self, and there is a presence of beingness and of self-presence over there, although we need that in an emotion, but on the other hand, it can lead to something negative. Because wherever there is even the slightest bit of ego and self, it can evolve and it can end up being the energy of the emotion itself can leak into unholiness. So last week we spoke about a very, very phenomenal concept, which is that when a lot of times in Chassidus it says that particular people who do meditative prayer, not regular people who come in and daven and say the words and go leave shul, or daven and go, but people who do Hasidic davening, which means to dwell on the words of prayer, like old Hasidim used to daven for hours and hours, deeply thinking and deeply meditating, singing tunes, and getting to a place where they really, really, really experienced, at a certain point of prayer, an expansion of their emotions. And they turned into basically experiencing a fiery love for God, a passion, a fervor, which is the objective of prayer. Now, Chassidus says, you gotta, that's enormous, that's great, because you fulfill the mitzvah, v'ahavta Hashem Elokecha, love God, your God, b'chol levavcha, with all your heart, all your soul. So you fulfill that mitzvah, you're getting closer to God, you're bringing God into your emotions, it's awesome. But in the teachings of Chassidus, it comes with a warning. It comes with a very big warning. What's the warning? The fact that you're all rallied up with self, with a holy self. I'm loving God, but you're feeling yourself. I love. You've stirred your emotions. Your heart is pumping. So after you close the Seder, and you might go away from the davening, slowly your meditation of what your consciousness and your awareness, your spiritual consciousness and awareness will fade. You will not be in that state of clarity that you had during prayer, that God is the only reality and that you're loving God with all your soul. That will fade, and you'll start realizing the world a little more, time and space a little more, people a little more. Here's the danger. The danger is your heart is still pumping with excitement. You're still fired up. You're still what we call turned on. There is an excitement. The heart is in state. But you're not focused anymore on God. So you're left with this residue of extra energy. What might happen with that extra energy is it can turn towards an unhealthy love and a passion, which had you never davened, you would have never had that problem, because your heart would have been dull and dead. So you would not have had this passion. But now, because there is this leftover passion in your heart that is not being directed towards Hashem, your engine is still turned on, your motor is still turned on, but the focus isn't here anymore. It's possible that it will latch itself on to something unholy, and a person is gonna fall into a desire that's negative and end up sinning with the holy energy of the neshama that was towards God. That energy is gonna be misused and usurped by the klipa, by the unholy. Or it can turn in, because you're so rallied up, someone messes with you, you'll have you'll get really explode with anger, you'll have a temper tantrum, and really, had you not davened, you would have never had that, because you've created this extra energy. It says, however, so that's the danger of energy being misused. I mentioned last week that there's a very phenomenal thing that the sages tell us, that there's a minhag that after the holidays. So I want to carry this thought a little further. Just like this can happen in daily prayer, after a holiday, it is way more dangerous, because a holiday, you spend 7 days in that expansive openness and energy flow. Your emotions have been let loose and opened up. And even though during the holiday it was all focused towards God, but the week after the holiday, you have this, you're coming out of Sukkot and Simchas Torah with a tank full of energy. And if you're not very focused to run just to do mitzvahs with that energy and do good things, you can have a big fall. You can fall into really dark stuff because of that. So I said, interesting, there is a minhag by many people, it's brought in halacha, that they would fast Monday, Thursday, Monday after a holiday. And it's all, so the simple reason is, just in case people sin during the holiday. But the deeper meaning is, why would you sin during the holiday? Because of the extra excessive energy, you need to protect that. It needs to be protected. And I'm going to add to it something that the Rambam says, that even on the holidays themselves, they would send out police amongst the celebrators on the holidays to make sure that the parties do not turn into wild parties. So you can understand it as, not everybody's tuning into the Chassidus, not everybody's tuning into the spiritual. It's Sukkot, it's Hakafas. So we all know the Hakafas are happening, inside the shul. There's the Hakafas, and then there's the riffraff that hang around outside. They come to shul, the boys, the girls, the whole thing is happening. So there is all this stuff happening in the outer peripheral, and that's what the Rambam is talking about. They would have these Tznius police to make sure that everybody's behaving. But I'm understanding it now from a much deeper level. I'm sharing with you that even though he doesn't say it openly, is that on a spiritual level, you need those police, even if it's not a police with a baton or a police with a whatever, but you need your own policeman to police your own excessive energy, not to go into the unholiness because you've created a holy storm and there is excessive energy. Now, this concept we find already in our forefathers. We know that Avraham had a son, Yishmael. Yishmael, as we can see today still, was a tyrant, was in Yiddish you say, a wilde chaya. He was in a para adam, as the Pasuk calls him, a wild beast. Now, Yishmael is a much bigger troublemaker than all the other Gentile pagans who lived in the time of Avraham. Avraham had a son who was a much bigger criminal and a troublemaker than the pagans who lived in his days. Now, how can Avraham's son become such a monster? And the answer is because he's Avraham's son. Because Avraham had an enormous amount of love and kindness, Avraham's soul was oozing with love and with kindness, and he was channeling the most intense energies of kindness. There can be a leakage from a holy kindness can leak an unholy kindness. And that's the Yishmael misinterpretation of Avraham. Isaac, Yitzhak, on the other hand, served God with the biggest level of gevura and awe and fear and from him, but with intensity. Yitzchak's service was with enormous intensity. From him came Esau, who was the biggest killer that there ever was, worse than anyone else who was in his generation. And he's the son of Isaac. And the answer is because he's the son of Isaac. Because he's leaking Yitzchak's energy to the wrong things. This tells you and shows you how even that the holier something is, the more it needs to be guarded. You need to watch it. Holiness needs to be guarded. It's not, and we have to be very careful when we engage in spirituality, which means we increase the energy of our soul, we become the target of hackers who want to hack that energy and take that very energy into unholy things because of the excess of holiness. However, we learned last week that shmira and that protection is only needed on Yom Tiv, on the holidays. It's not needed on Shabbos. The excessive energies that flow on Shabbos do not require any special protection and any guarding. Why? Because we learned that on Shabbos, the entire basis of our expanded spirituality is not coming from the dynamic of Bina, it's coming from the dynamic of Chachma. It's coming from father and not from mother. Now, what's the difference between Chachma and Bina? Chachma, although Chachma is also a stage of intelligence, but Chachma is dominated by Bittul. The essence of Chachma is not self. The essence of Chachma is a complete silence of a person's mind and surrender and openness to something higher. In Chachma, it's not grasping. When you have an epiphany, when a new flash enters your mind, which was usually described as Chachma, you didn't grasp it yet. There's no self. If you feel yourself while you're having an epiphany, you're not having an epiphany. The only way you can have epiphany is that you don't exist at that moment and something new enters your head. That's what happens on the right side of the brain. In the left side of the brain is when you start chewing on it and you starting to fit it with yourself. Chachma is an act. It's the art of non-being, not the art of beingness. So therefore, in Chachma, there's no yesh. It's only ayin. V'chachma me ayin. Chachma comes from ayin. And Chachma itself is called ayin, nothingness. Therefore, when you have an expanded illumination of Chachma, there is no I over there. There's no self. And therefore, where there is no self, where there's no metzias, where there's no existence, there's no yanikas achitzonim. There's no leaking to go into negative things. Bittul and surrender to God never leads to sin. Sin can only come from where there is a self. an existence of, like we always find, for example, King Saul. King Saul was rebuked by Samuel. Why he was using his own mind, why he didn't surrender completely to the will of God. He started making calculations that he wants to, it's a shame to kill all the animals of Amalek. Let's let them live. In the end, he ended up saving Khomeini himself, the Agag, who survived and was not killed, and Amalek had a continuation in the world because King Saul didn't kill him. Why didn't he kill him? The problem wasn't that he took a misstep later. This problem was that when he went into the battle to begin with, he didn't do it because God said so. He did it because he understood that this is the right thing to do. When you mix yourself into something, there is always a danger. So it could be when you're bringing yourself into something that you're in a holy, you're doing something holy, you're doing something godly, you're doing something positive. But if you there is always, once it's based on self, then you can always take a misstep. If what you're doing is because you're if your first premise, if your foundation and everything in Yiddishkeit is God said so, you're safe. Because you're always anchored in God's will. The moment it starts becoming about myself, now it's okay. You're supposed to bring it into yourself. You're supposed to feel. You're supposed to understand. You're supposed to fill yourself with pleasure in Judaism and in holiness. But that can never be the foundation. If it starts with Bina and it doesn't start with Chachma, it's dangerous. If it starts with Chachma, then even when you move it to the Bina is still anchored in the Chachma. It's always based on God's will. This energy can never be misused. That's why it says in the Pasuk, Yamusu, there is death, which death represents anything that leaks into the unholy is called death. Yamusu v'loy b'chachma, but not in chachma. In wisdom, there is no shviras hakelim, there's no shattering of the vessels, there's no breaking, there's nothing that can leak into the unholy. That's the reason we say that Shabbos, the holiness of Shabbos and the meals of Shabbos are very protected. It doesn't leak to the Gentiles at all. It's oisi. Hashem makes a sign, beini ubein bnei Yisroel, between me and the children of Israel. We also learned last week, that's why on Shabbos you don't have to have guests. It's a good thing to have guests at your house on Shabbos, but a Shabbos meal doesn't require guests. A holiday, you must bring guests to your meal, or else the Zohar says it's a very, very big, because since you're dealing with Bina, from Bina it can leak to the other side, and from there it starts the concept of dinim. Judgments can come from Bina, so you have to sweeten the judgments by bringing poor people in. We had a whole discussion last week that by bringing a poor people doesn't only mean poor. It means anybody that doesn't have a meal for Yom Tov or for whatever reason, you bring people into your meals on the holiday, you sweeten the judgments. And sweetening of judgments is protecting this energy. That's kind of the idea. That's what we learned in our classes. And now, based on that, we're going to continue learning further. Okay. Ubegin kach, the Zohar says, Ikra Shabbos. That's the reason why it's called Shabbos. Mahu Shabbos, what is Shabbos? Shema, the Kutsha Berichu, it's the name of God. Shema, the Iu Shalom, it's the name of Hashem, the Iu Shalom that is complete, Mekol Sitroi, from all directions. The name of Hashem that is complete from every side. And now he's going to be, he's not going to, it's interesting, he doesn't focus on the idea, what it says, what is Shabbos, that Shabbos is the name of God, that he doesn't focus on. But he explains the second part of this statement, which says that it's the name that is complete from all directions. What does it mean from all directions? So he's going to explain the idea, this concept that we just spoke about, that Bina could leak into an expansiveness of Bina can always, Bina herself is holy, 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 holy. And it's a place of pure joy and there's no judgments there. But from what can evolve from Bina is the beginning of constrictions, judgments, and eventually, after a million evolutions, it can end up in the dark side. From Chachma, there, where there is chachma energy, even the external elements of chachma do not leak. That's what he's going to explain in this piece. That's the meaning of that Shabbos is shalom, it's complete, mikol sitrai, from all sides. The sides represent the peripheral elements of a attribute. There is the essence of the attributes, and then there is the sides of the offshoots of the attributes. So since Shabbos is chachma, and chachma, because Shabbos is called Shabbos Kodesh, Kodesh is chachma, like we learned pure holiness, bittul. The essence of Shabbos is bittul, bittul nullified. What's the main mitzvah of Shabbos? Not working, meaning not doing your thing, tuning into God. It's a total, it's nullification because God's presence is there. That's Shabbos. So from that energy of chachma, it's complete from sitrahi, from all his sides, means not only the nucleus of chachma, but even the outer peripheral elements of chachma, even the outer sphirot of chachma, even the lowest parts of chachma. Chachma is always protected. But bina, he's going to explain, although bina, the nucleus of bina, is always perfect and clean and holy and godly, but from the external parts of bina can evolve an impurity and a negativity, as he explains over here. Piddish, what does it mean? Mikol sitrahi, from all the sides. Inyan, who the idea is, lefisha pchinas bina da atzilos, because the element of bina, of the world of emanation, which is the first of the four worlds, which is the world of the divine sphirot and the attributes, where all action is taking place. We're all divine. All the holidays and all these energies flows are flowing, and this Yom Tov, it's flowing into this sphere and in this attribute, and so on and so forth. So bina of atzilus haredin and misaron mina. What did we say? Judgments are awakened from her. From bina can come judgments. Vahainu. What does that mean? So he clarifies. Not from bina herself. Bina herself is always protected. What does that mean? A pure meditation and an understanding itself can never leak into something dark. By learning Torah and understanding something great about God and grasping it and understanding it, it itself, that experience itself, doesn't lead directly. It itself, while you're in that experience, no klipa is nibbling from it. No klipa is gnashing from it. Nothing is taking energy from that level. But from what comes from it, since the bina has an ego, has an I, what happens from it? It produces even a bigger I. What's the bigger I? The emotions that come from bina have more of a I. I'm excited. I'm feeling myself. Oh, so now I'm excited and I love God. 5 minutes later, I love spicy potato chips. That's very same love, because it's about I. Okay, so now God is in my focus, and now it's potato. Now, it's kosher? Yeah, it probably is. I'm saying, first of all, the fact that you're loving potato chips is already getting off. But and then you're saying, once you're following what you love, then I love, and then I love, and then I love, and then I love, and then I find myself loving, and then I forgot about God completely, and it's all about my love. So it's all about self. So there is where it takes off. In every relationship, this can be understood in interpersonal relationships as well, in marriage and so on and so forth. If your basis of your marriage is not yourself, but you when you love someone else, it's there's always a I love you. But if it's you and the I is small and the you is huge, then you're always safe in your marriage, because that. But if it's I love you, you happen to be a little detail in the I love. Then, today I love you because you're interesting. Today you're not so interesting anymore. I find someone else to love. So you realize the love is so dangerous. The very love, you can be in the full, powerful romance with someone. You can be on your feet and this and that. But guess what? A year or two later, not interesting anymore. I found someone else. Because it never was about you. It was always about me loving. So in every relationship, the basis has to be a surrender to the relationship. That's what a marriage really is. It's an establishment. I'm totally surrendering. It's not about, I love you very much. I found you beautiful and wonderful and good and whatever it is. But I'm going under the chuppah. I'm surrendering all of that to the fact that we are married. And I'm surrendering myself to the fact that we are married, and that means you and no one else. And now that reality is bigger than me. Now I will find myself in it as well. But there is something, the institution of the marriage itself is infinitely bigger than how I feel about it. Now I will try and explore and grow all my life to feel more in that. And if I don't feel, I'm still committed to the marriage because the it is much bigger than the me. That's holy, godly, and then it lasts. But if it starts off just with self, then it can go very quickly, God forbid, down south. So that's the secret that we're learning over here, that you need to have Moichen da Abba and everything. Because Moichen da Abba, which is father energy, which is surrender to something, which is complete nullification to something, is the nucleus which keeps things protected, safe, and holy. So Vahainu, but he says, Misitrahu, when we say Bina, there can come negativity from, the dinim can come from Bina, is not from the Bina itself, it's Misitrahu from her side. Like stated elsewhere, the Bina, Misitraha, that Bina from her side, Dinan Misaren. The judgments come from. What does that mean? Pidish Misitrahu, what does it mean from the side? I know Mahatstadim from the sides, from the branches that branch off the Bina. Vahu, and that is Chinas Tavuna. That there is Bina and Tavuna. We're going to learn new Gevaldige Geschmacke ideas here. What it means is like this. Generally, the sphere that we're from, of those who are a little familiar with Kabbalistic terminology, we know that 10 sfirot, Chachma Bina. So we're familiar with Bina, which Bina means understanding. But if we get more nuanced, we are told in Kabbalah that in Bina there is a secondary level called Tavuna. Now Tavuna and Bina are almost the same word. Bina is understanding and Tavuna means understanding. The difference, however, is that Tavuna is a later stage in the Bina. Bina is very abstract understanding. When you understand something, but in a very abstract way, which means it's purely intellectual. Tavuna is when you're understanding it, and the understanding is beginning to bend towards the emotions. It's like intellect is beginning. It's, you know what it is? Bina is called mother, meaning the woman, the supernal woman. Tavuna is when the mother is pregnant. In other words, she's beginning to carry already the emotions. It's not yet the emotions. You don't have the children yet, but the children are beginning to to develop within the mother. That's why the word Bina, the word Tavuna, has within it the word Ben and Bas. Bas is daughter. That's Gevura, which is feminine. And Ben is Chesed, which is male. So the Ben and the Bas are the son and the daughter. That's the Chesed and the Gevura, while it's still in the Bina. So Bina means I'm understanding something, but I'm beginning already to understand it in relationship to me. Bina in general means I'm grasping, but I can grasp something. I'm understanding it. It's all about it. In Tavuna, I'm beginning to think already. So this is so wonderful. How is it good for me? I'm beginning to put myself into the picture. When I'm getting excited that Torah is great, so the Bina of it is like, this is awesome Torah. Then when I start thinking, so Torah is so good for me, that's already Tavuna. I'm beginning to bend the emotions toward the intellect towards the emotion. From that, eventually will come a full-fledged emotion, which is I want it, I desire it, or I'm afraid of it, or whatever the emotional reaction is. But the emotional reaction is when the Tavuna is born. When it's still in a more intellectual state, it's called Tavuna. That's where the I, the intellectual I, is much more present than in the Bina. In the Bina, there is a very, very, very quiet I, but there is an I. And therefore, Bina herself can never be corrupted. But the Tavuna is already a stage down, closer to the emotion. The Yesh, the something of Bina, is more present over here. You feel yourself more over here. That's the reason why this is where we can start detecting already the possibility for the klipos to come in and take energy from it. Now, he's going to say in a moment, even tvuna is not hackable. Bina, the beautiful thing is like this. Chachma is not hackable at all. That means even what will evolve from Chachma is not hackable. Chachma is safe no matter how far it goes. And that's why I said earlier, if you base your every connection, your every commitment on a deep surrender to, it's not about me, I'm surrendering to something bigger, then you're always going to be safe. If you base it on self, which is what Bina is, from there, even though now it's so pure and you're so focused on each other and your life is so much about, it's not safe in 10 years from now because things can erode. So Chachma will be safe no matter what. Bina is the source of dinim. But when we say Bina is the source of dinim, he says like this, Bina itself is not the source yet. The second stage of Bina, which is the Tavuna, is the source. But even the Tavuna, he says, is still not hackable itself. It's the emotions that will be born from the Tavuna. That's where the actual hacking happens. That's the meaning that from Avraham, who is the emotion of Chesed, comes Yishmael. From Yitzhak, who is the emotion of Gevura, comes Esav. The emotions is where the real watching and the guarding has to take place on. But where is it becoming closer to a misuse is in the Tavuna. That's what he's explaining here. And this is the level of Tavuna. It is drawn. It evolves mitztadei habina, from the sides of bina. Ki yadua, as it is known. The tvuna oisiyos, and therefore tvuna is the letters bein ubas, son and daughter. The hainu b'chinas hamidos, these are the emotions, but these are elevated emotions because these are not yet the emotions in the heart. These are the emotions in the mind. So since it's in the mind, it's still protected. But since it's the emotions, there's already a slight little red flag there. You have to protect it. That's the point. It's still but it's the mochin, it's the intellect, but it's the intelligence as it's already flowing to the emotions. Like it is known by Pirish Betvuna. In Chassidus it says something very interesting. There's a pasuk that says Betvuna. It's a pasuk in Mishlei, in Proverbs. It says a fool does not want understanding. Ki im bihis galos libai, I think it says, only in the revelation of his heart. A fool does not want tavuna, does not want understanding. Lo yachpots ksil, a fool does not desire tavuna, understanding. Kiyem, rather, bihis galos libai, the revealed heart. What does that mean? I don't know the regular pirush of that pasuk. I would have to learn it with Rashi and see how the ordinary interpretation of that verse is. But the Hasidic interpretation, from a more mystical perspective, it means like this. A fool, which fool over here refers to the Yetzer Hara, who's called the Melech Zaken Uksil, he's called an old king fool, says does not want Tavuna. He doesn't want understanding, he wants a revealed heart. What does that mean? We are in a much safer space when our spirituality is driven by a conviction of the mind than when it's actually being driven by an tangible emotion. What that means is like this, literally what we were talking about earlier. In Tanya, it's very interesting. In Tanya, he discusses, it's a mitzvah to love God. It's a mitzvah to love Hashem and to fear God. The Alter Rebbe in chapter 17 in Tanya discusses a situation where someone meditates, and the Alter Rebbe says the program works like this. When you meditate on God's greatness, you will end up loving God. It has to be that way because the heart will be inspired by the intellect. If you focus on Hashem, you will love Him because God is lovable. So if you will meditate on Him, you will come to love Him. Fine. But the Alter Rebbe says sometimes people have blockages. They meditate and meditate and meditate, and they don't feel emotions. And the Alter Rebbe says sometimes it can be because of a stuffed heart. Sometimes it can be because you clogged your heart, as we said earlier, with too much French fries. Or whatever. You clogged it with too much gashmias. And that kind of is not allowing you to be sensitive towards spirituality. That's one level. But a lot of times he says, even a person who's pure, and they don't engage, they're just trying very hard. Sometimes their emotions just don't open up. And the Alter Rebbe says it could be that their souls are rooted in the level, they're a soul that comes from Tevuna. And what does that mean? It means that their emotions always get stuck in the intellect. They don't land in the heart. Their souls are rooted in the pregnant emotion, in the fetus, the emotions when they're still a fetus, instead of the emotions when they're born. These people, their heart, the emotions do not flow so much into their heart. They remain in their intellect. Now the Alter Rebbe says, but don't worry, it's still considered an emotion. That means if you're meditating and you get excited in your mind that I ought to be excited, but I'm not feeling it in my heart. I'm not feeling that my heart is going ablaze. But I have a conviction in my mind that I really should be excited. It's such an awesome Shabbos this week. I really should be excited. I'm not feeling it, but I should be excited. That feeling that I should be excited, the Alter Rebbe says counts as an excitement. And he says you should know, sometimes it's actually a much better excitement, because that excitement is not going to leak to the impure. Because your whole excitement is still enclosed in the conviction of the mind, so it will never be misused. If you would have been born, if the emotion would have fully been born in the heart, and you're feeling just excitement, once the focus will go away, because you can't focus the whole day, you will be left with leftover energy of excitement, and it can leak to the unholy. So what he's saying over there, the pasuk is saying, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, wants you to have experiential emotions, because then he can leak them. He doesn't like when you only have a tvuna emotion. So a lot of times people are I see it in today's world more than ever before. Everybody wants to feel, which is a good thing, because we're tuning in. We want to feel. Everybody wants to go to kumzitz. You want to feel. You just want to feel. You want to feel. But the truth is, not always is feeling so good, because even when you bring yourself to holy spiritual feelings, and you open up your heart and you experience that could land you in not good places if it's not very controlled and very directed. So a lot of times Hashem is doing help, is saving us from falling by not allowing our emotions to fully develop in the heart, keeping them a little bit above the heart, keeping them in a more hidden place in the mind, because they're in a much greater safe zone. And that it's almost like the little kids can't get into trouble when they're still in mom's stomach. They don't run into the mud. When they're born, they're all over the place. They're getting into everything. They're making a mess in the house. The kids themselves can, once you let them free, they can. But while the mother has them in her womb, they're protected. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't have your babies, keep them forever in your womb? Not a good idea. But if you might as well enjoy the fact that while they're in the womb, at least, to have that safety zone. So the pasuk. So why is he bringing that verse over here? Because he wants to tell us the concept that there is bina, which is totally above the emotions, and over there is no ego at all, or there is ego, but a very, very, very pure state of self, and therefore that's not corruptible. The next stage is the tvuna, which the tvuna itself is not yet a place of misuse of energy, but it's at least the beginning of an emotion where the emotions will later, God forbid, being able to become yanikas achitzonim and go into the dinim. That's what he's explaining over here. Ki yadua bepirish layachbes ksil betvuna, that the ksil, the fool, does not want tvuna. Umavur lamayla shahadinim, the judgments, mista'afim min amidos, they come from the emotions. Sharsham harishon, what's the first root? The judgments are plugging in. Like, Where is the real dinim starting? When Avraham Avinu's neshama chas v'shalom gets hacked by Yishmael, and Yitzchak's neshama get hacked by Esav, and you see Yitzchak is pouring blessings to Esav. He wants to. Hashem protected him through Rivka, that he gave the blessings to Jacob. But you see that there is a possibility of misuse of energy. So the emotions are susceptible. The intellect that's higher than the emotions are not susceptible. The in-between intellect and the emotions, the tavuna state, that's called the origins of. And let me put it this way: when the chitzonim see bina, they're not even getting ready to attack, because in bina it's too high for them; they can't go there. When they see tavuna, they start smacking their lips. They know that they're not ready to dive in for the hack yet, but they're already seeing a place where they're going to be able to hack. When the emotions are born, that's when they go in for an attack. So now these are the stages. You can see how the dinim can come. From bina, no. From tavuna, it's brewing. It's moving to a place where it's being revealed to the outside. It's going closer to a place where the wrong eyes can get on it. And finally, in the emotions is where. Now, what's amazing is the same thing that happens by us, but everybody realize, the same thing that happens by us in our small little world happens in the divine scheme at all, in the cosmic order. In Hashem's emotions, there could be a hack. That's what's so crazy over here. That's where you get these klippas and the satanic forces get in there and take energy and if to the wrong things, and you end up with a lot of evil in the world because they're Visharsham Harishon, and their first root, tvuna shebebina. The tvuna of the bina is susceptible to this corruption. V'loy bebina atzma, but not in the bina itself. Keniskali el, like we said earlier. Hine yedua. Now he's going to do a comparative analysis. How about the emotions from the chachma? Tvuna is in between the intellect and the emotions, is the tvuna. Now, how about this chachma? This chachma, which is wisdom, also has 10 sefirot. So is there a stage equivalent to tvuna in chachma? So he says yes. The stage equivalent to tvuna in chachma is called Yisroel. In Kabbalah, it's called Yisroel Saba. The old Israel. The grandfather Yisroel. What does that mean? Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov are the three emotions. But when they are emotions, they're called the small Yisroel. The small Avraham, the small Yitzhak, and the small Yisroel. When these very emotions are still in the Chachma, which is much higher than the emotions, when they're still part of the initial Chachma, it's called the grandfather Yisroel, the old Yisroel. Because it's in Chachma, it's much higher than when it's in the Ze'er Anpin, which means a regular emotion. It's the emotion when it's still in the intellect, but not in the Bina. It's like the children while they're still in the father, not in the mother. What's the difference between children that are in the father and the mother? Every man is carrying his future children inside of him. But when they're in the father, they're so hidden that he himself doesn't know about it. They don't have any weight. When they're in the mother, there's actually pregnancy. There's an actual existence of the child there. But while they're still in the father, then they're so sublime, so hidden. So therefore, Yisroel Saba, the level called Yisroel Saba, is the equivalent to Tavuna in Bina. Yisroel Saba is the emotions while they're still in the father. Now, what he's doing the comparison is he says that in the emotions of the father, there's the klippas can't get there at all. It's not even a source of a source of a source, because it belongs to Chachma. Because Chachma, since Chachma is bittul, is not self, is ayin, is nothingness. From nothingness, the klippas can't. They don't have any access there. That lane is completely closed to them. They can't go on that lane at all. They can't drive on the freeway of Chachma. They don't have an access code to get in there because they don't have bittul. The whole Chachma is bittul, and Klippa is the total opposite of bittul. They don't surrender to God. They don't have the bittul. So they're not have. So therefore, he's going to explain that that's the meaning that on Shabbos is complete mikol sitrahi from all her sides. from all his sides. Since Shabbos is Moichen the Chachma, so even the Yisroel Saba, which is the lower side of Chachma, it's the emotions of Chachma. And we're going to see soon, it's primarily the Netzach Hod Yisod of Chachma. Tevuna is really the Netzach Hod Yisod of Bina. Again, Netzach Hod Yisod are the lowest emotions, the emotions as they're getting down to practicality. So the Netzach Hod Yisod of Bina is called Tevuna, and the Netzach Hod Yisod of Chachma is called Yisroel Saba. Now, when you look at the two, from the Tevuna, there could be a leakage to the unholy side. Dinim can come from it. Judgments can come from it, from the Tevuna. But from Chachma, from Yisroel Saba, nothing can come from it. It's protected. That's the point. In a Yidua, it is known, Yisroel Saba u'Tevuna, that Yisroel Saba and Tevuna. Now, by the way, you finish this class, you will be a semi-certified Kabbalist. Okay. You can go order yourself a white little turban, and you can start selling Kabbalah water. Okay? In a Yidua, you should, it is known, Yisroel Saba u'Tevuna, that Yisroel Saba and Tevuna, Nikra, they are called Abba ve'ima tata'in. They're called the lower father and mother. Because Chachma and Bina are called the higher father and mother. Follow? Chachma is called father, and Bina is called mother. However, the Tevuna is the lower mother, because it's the mother, Bina, as she's getting closer to the emotions. And Yisroel Saba is Chachma, as it is also getting closer to the emotions. So that's why it's called the lower father and mother. The Shoirish Yisroel Saba, Yutshin Samach, stands for Yisroel Saba. The root of Yisroel Saba, who is Ba'aba Ilah, is in the supernal Abba, in the supernal father, which is the level of Chachma. The Shoirish Tevuna, and what's the root of Tevuna? Be'ema Ilah, in the supernal mother. That means Tevuna is rooted in Bina, and Yisroel Saba is rooted in Chachma. Hence the difference that he's going to explain. Now, the Imkain, and if so, Kamoisha Tevuna Nikra Sitra de Bina, just like Tevuna is called the side, the peripheral of Bina, the side element of Bina, Kach Pchinas Yisroel Saba, so the Yisroel Saba, Nikra, is called Sitrai, it's called the side, the Abila of the supernal father of Chachma. The reason he's explaining that is because he wants to explain what the Zohar means when the Zohar says Shabbos is perfect from all her sides. So he's explaining what means the side of Shabbos. The side of Shabbos means the sides of Chachma, the lower parts of Chachma. Even where Chachma is leading into the emotions as they come from Chachma are very much, I'll put it this way, to put it in simple terminology, the emotion that comes from Bina is I love you. The emotion that comes from Chachma is I love you. The you is huge because in Chachma everything is, it's not about self. Everything is about the one. It's a surrender. It's not, it's you're lost in whatever you're loving. So the you is a much bigger fact in the case with God. God is the huge thing. It's not about, see, people can become so, you can become a glutton in spirituality as well. Even spirituality can become just about my experiences. I have my coffee, I have my yoga, and I have my davening, and I have my experiences. It's all about self. So I'm saying it becomes so, it becomes just another expression of ego. And that's very unholy. So now I'm not putting down Bina, because Bina is holy and godly, but the Bina experience can lead to that type of Judaism and that kind of a religiosity and that kind of a spirituality that is all about self. It's when the Hollywood stars start going to the Kabbalah Center and becoming spiritual. There's nothing to do with the godliness of it. It has all to do with the self-experience of it. I'm not saying maybe there should be, hopefully, someone who's approaching it with purity. But that's what the Kabbalah Center is kind of selling. That kind of self-actualization. It's all about the self. As opposed to Chassidus, which is giving you a null. Chassidus is telling you the first second you walk in, it slaps you down. It says you're a nobody. Be not that you're a nobody. You have capabilities of everything because Hashem is choosing you, but it's not about you. It's about God. That's Moichen the Abba. That's coming from Chachma. That's why we don't have Bad. We have Chabad. Chachma bin Nadas. It has to be sourced in Chachma. And when it's sourced in Chachma, then even the Bina is kosher. And everything that will evolve from it will be kosher. Kach b'chinas Yisroel Saba Nikra Sitra comes the side, the Abilah. And what is it? What is Yisroel Saba? He says it's the emotions that are part of the intellect. It's the chesed that's included in chachma. Now here he says it's the chesed. In other places it explains it's the netzach hod yisod. It's the lowest tier of emotions that are in intellect. It's called Yisroel Sab. The Kamashakasim explained elsewhere. And this is what the Zohar says over here. The Shabbos shu b'chinas moichen the Abba bilvad. That Shabbos that's called mochen the Abba, the mochen of the Father, canal. Who nikra? We're holding on the beginning, on the top of the second paragraph of the first page. The second line. Who nikra, and it's called Shema de Kutra Berichu. It's called the name of God. Who Shema de Shalom. It's the name that is complete. Mikol Setrai, from all sides. Piddish. What does that mean? Shu Shalom, it is complete. Miyanika Sadinim. There is no usurping of the dinim, of the judgments. The klipas cannot get into it. Because the dinim are not able to grasp on, and they can't derive energy from the light of Chachma, because the illuminance of Chachma it brings bittul. Bittul meaning self-abnegation and non-beingness, and klipa is all about self, and they just can't handle the beautiful, delicious aromas of Chachma, because to them, the aroma of Chachma means death to them. Bittul means to them dying. They don't want to live in Bittul. They can't. To anybody that comes from the realm of holiness, Bittul is delicious. If I can only forget about myself a little bit and do your will, I'm so happy. The Jewish neshama is programmed that way. We're happy when we can surrender ourselves to something bigger than ourselves. But an impure soul has to have a self and everything, and therefore they can't handle a bittul, and nothingness. And even from the sides, even the sides that come from it, even the offshoots that come from Chachma can never leak to the klipas. Shuanikra Setroi, that's called the sides of Chachma. Hainu the gam b'pchinas Yisroel Saba Yutshin Samach is Yisroel Saba. Even the Yisroel Saba Sheba Chachma, that's Chachma. That's the nether side of Chachma. It's the tail end of Chachma. Ein adinim mekabla misham. The judgments cannot receive from there. Ma'ashenke b'pchinas Bina, which is not the case of Bina, kamay b'yamtiv, like in Yamtiv, shenachazem adinim, that the judgments take hold, bevav k'tzavos, in the 6 emotions that come from the Yamtiv. Since Yamtiv is an expansion of Bina and not so much Chachma there, so there is always a danger of Yamtiv that not the essence of the Yamtiv, but the ramifications of the holidays could lead to some negativity. You have to be careful. The Makabla Mebchenes Tvuna on Yamtiv, we're receiving from this. The six emotions are receiving from Tvuna. Shanikra Misitroi the Ema, they're called the side of mother. Ikamashakasav the Bina Misitroi Dina Misarin, like it says in Zohar that Bina, from her side, judgments come. Not from Bina herself, but from her side. And as explained earlier, the Minamidois, from the emotions that come from Tvuna, Nimtsaim Hadinim, that's where judgment starts. Okay, Dafke Shabbos. So Dafka, therefore we say Dafka Shabbos, who Shema is the name, the Shalom Mikol Sitroi. Nothing bad can ever come out of Shabbos. Shabbos is complete, mikol setroi from all sides. V'lo Yom Tiv and not Yom Tiv. Take you back to October 7th. We find that those kibbutzim that were keeping Shabbos, the terrorists couldn't get into. There was one or two places where they came. They went to a bunch of things in the otef, in the envelope, and it was Shabbos. And those places that kept Shabbos, they just didn't, because you can see the dark side has no access point into it. But what I'm saying is that's when this idea manifested even in the physical. Doesn't mean that no one was ever attacked on Shabbos, that someone who keeps Shabbos. But in that story, you saw that Shabbos protected because, and here you have a deeper understanding. Why did Shabbos protect? Because the impure forces cannot hack Shabbos. And where there's a Shabbos, they couldn't even get into it. Rabbi Yossi. Now Rabbi Yossi says, Vadai kachu. Now Rabbi Yossi gets all excited about this. And Rabbi Yossi says, definitely it's so. See, till now it was all Reb Shimon speaking. So now Rabbi Yossi gets excited. And he says, definitely it's like this. They labar nash, woe is to a person that does not complete the joy in these 3 meals. Simply it means woe to a person who doesn't have the 3 meals of Shabbos. But also it means who does not complete the joy. It's not just to have the meals, but to be joyous in those meals, to tune in to the incredible godliness of those meals. Why, he says? Because these are such awesome meals. Seudas, Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. They are the meals of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They are the meals of our forefathers, Avraham. Kalil and Behu are all, that the Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov are all 3 are included in these meals. Incorporated in these meals are Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, which is a new concept so far over here, because we spoke about in the last few classes, each meal, how do you identify the meal? Now we find out that the meals correspond to Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, which is a nugget that we didn't have yet, a piece that we didn't learn yet about. He's going to explain it over here. What's the relationship to Friday night's meal to Avraham, Shabbos morning meal to Yitzchak, and Shabbos afternoon meal to Yaakov? But this is what Rabbi Yossi says. These meals are so awesome that all our 3 forefathers are all included in these meals. V'kulu chadu al chada. And all these meals are not just a celebration, they're not just a joy, they're a joy on top of a joy. It's not just simcha, it's a simcha above a simcha, a joy above a joy. Mehemnasa shleimasa mikol sitrai. A complete faith from all directions. Perfect from all sides. So now the Alter Rebbe is going to explain what is Rabbi Yossi excited, what is he expressing in these holy words of the Zohar. Pidish, and now he says, we explained earlier, when we spoke about the 3 Shabbos meals, Hasuda Echad Bilel Shabbos, we spoke that the Friday night meal, Hu the Chakal Tapuchin, is the meal of the apple orchard. We were learning in the last few classes that there is a passage from the Zohar that is said by each of the 3 meals. It's called Askinu Sudasa. We will prepare the meal in Aramaic. In each of them, it lists the divine energies that is the internal chemistry of those meals. So by every meal, it has a different description. Friday night, we say, this is the meal of the holy apple orchard. Shabbos by day, we say, this is the meal of the ancient one. Atika Kadisha, the holy ancient, or Atik Yomen, the ancient one. And by the 3rd meal, we say, Dahu Sudasa, this is the meal, the Ze'er Anpin of the small face, Ze'er Anpin. Which means that these are different levels in the Sefirot above, and each one represents, right? So Vagam. So now he's going to show how the meal of Friday night belongs to Avraham Avinu, the meal of the apple orchard. The meal of Shabbos day, which is of Atika Kadisha, of the holy ancient one, belongs to Yitzchak. And the third meal belongs to Yaakov. Why? I'm just going to do very briefly. In the earlier classes that we learned that Friday night is mainly an energy of ascent. The energy, everything is rising. What rises? Hashem completes the Shekhinah, which is the source of creation. Shekhinah is the divine energy, Malchut, that goes down to create the world. On Friday night, Hashem lets go like a person who does a project. He finishes his work, he completes his work, all of his energies exit the project, and you kick back and you have full of pleasure from what you produced. We discussed in earlier classes that whenever you have a project that you want to do, I don't know, you're doing pottery, you're doing a painting, you're writing a song, you're working on any other project, you're writing an article, whatever it is that you're doing, what triggers a project, unless you're doing it because you really need the money or something, but an innovation, something, your hobby, something exciting, is always a pleasure. There's a very deep pleasure in your soul that's calling you for this creativity, for this project. That's what's stimulating. But the pleasure is a trigger because you didn't even produce it yet. It's like you sense that you're going to have pleasure in doing this. So there's a silent pleasure of coming from, and that's called your keter of your neshama, your crown of your neshama is stirring. Pleasure is associated with the crown, super conscious powers. But it's a very, very quiet, subtle vibration coming from the Kesser. What does that do? It drives, since Kesser and pleasure is at the very, 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 very substance of life. The underlying drive in all of life, vibration of life, is pleasure. So when there is a stimulant of pleasure taking place at a very deep level, it sets all of your powers of your soul into action. And that means you sit down, you get your paintbrush, you get your thing, and you start brainstorming what you're going to do. Your intellect is working. It eventually excites your emotions, thought, speech, and action, pen and brush. And then you invest in yourself completely in this project, so much so that anything else disturbs you. You don't want to be busy with anything. You lock your door, you close your phone, everything you get shut down. You completely infused yourself in that project. While you're engaged in the project, you don't feel the pleasure, because then it's just work and exertion. You're exerting yourself. You're putting your energies into it. The pleasure is there. It's always there in the backdrop because it keeps the project on. It keeps the project on target, because what happens is when you start doing a project, sometimes you hit bumps in the road, or you start talking to other people and they say you should do it different. So if they're tweaking it in a good way, it's one thing. But a lot of times, once you start getting partners or you start getting other people, they want to derail your entire project from what you ever began with. And if you let them do that, you end up with a product, and then you come back and say, well, I don't have any pleasure in this. I never wanted this. It's a little bit of an art. Let's say you're building a house. And you start talking to designers. So they're the designers, and they're this. But they have to work with you. If they don't work with you and they derail your project and make it their project, then you end up investing all this time, all this money, all this energy, and you ended up with a house that you never wanted. So that's a problem with people, right? So a good architect and a good designer is going to pull it out of you. What do you want? I'm going to work with you, make it. Now, it might be it's not practical to do so I'm going to tweak it like this, tweak it like that. But that's why you need to have your vision and your pleasure there all along, because what triggered the whole thing is your pleasure in whatever the product that you wanted. But if you let it to run away from you, which happens times with businesses, with products, with organizations, you intended one thing and it became something completely different, and it hurts because it went off from what you intended. So the pleasure has to always be in the background as a very quiet reminder of what it's about, but you don't feel that pleasure. When do you really feel the pleasure? When everything is completed and you step back and you look and your pottery came out exactly as you wanted. Your craftsmanship, your painting, your piece of work, your piece of music, your song, you walked out of the studio, you have your music that you created, whatever it is, and it's completed, and you're like returning to yourself, you kick back, and suddenly the entire pleasure that was silent and quiet in the background comes powerfully into your consciousness and fills all of your soul with that original pleasure, as long as what you did in the end matched the initial dream that you dreamt. Then, if it came out off, flopped, this, that, then you don't have pleasure, you have pain, actually. So it has to be that the initial. So what do we have? So now imagine God, the same thing. Hashem has a pleasure. That's what drove all of Hashem's power into action 6 days of the week. And this happens not just the first time when God created, but since Hashem recreates every week. So every week Hashem is investing his energies into the creation. While he's doing it, his pleasure is not felt in his energies, in the entire cosmic order. Pleasure is not felt. But Friday night, when Hashem takes a look and everything he did this week is perfect, he kicks back. Two things happen. His energies that he invested into the creation, which is primarily the Shekhinah Malchus, rises, leaves the project, returns back to himself, but she rises up into the crown. That means she rises into the pleasure. The project rises into the pleasure. That's why it's called the meal, because the meal means pleasure. Because Shabbos meal is supposed to be a pleasurable meal. Shabbos food has to be tasty. So the meal, which is the Shabbos food, the pleasure, where is it being directed? Who is the main feature of that meal? The Shekhinah, who actually did the painting of the entire world this week. Now when she exits that project, she returns back into the greater source of her. She goes into the pleasure. That's the first Friday night meal. Shabbos morning, we learned it goes much deeper than that. Go back to a person who does a pleasurable project. The first pleasure you have when you rest, when you step back from finishing your project, is you have pleasure from that project, an enormous delight. But then there's something else. You go to sleep, you wake up the next morning, and you're not even in your studio now, but as you're laying in bed and waking up, you're feeling such satisfaction. This satisfaction that you're feeling today, or when you wake up and you go out and you're doing, is that you have another successful project in your life. So now you're delighting, but you're not delighting in the project, you're delighting in yourself, that you've had such a delightful, that you've accomplished another accomplishment. You feel tremendously wonderful about yourself. That's a much deeper delight. You're not delighting in the project, you're delighting that's called the delight of all delights. Because this particular delight that you had in making that painting was one particular facet of your pleasure. But now you're returning back, that pleasure is returning back to the source of all pleasures, which is called the will of all wills, the delight of all delights. That happens Shabbos morning when God is delighting in himself. What that means is that the Malchut rose to Kesser, and the Kesser itself, which is the pleasure of the project, rose to the Kesser of Kesser, which is called Atik Yomin, the Ancient of Days. That's why Shabbos day is such a deep level. Much higher, because you're in a far more grandiose place within God. You're in the pleasure of pleasure, which happens on Shabbos morning, by the second Shabbos meal. And that's why it's called the meal of Atika Kadisha, of the Ancient of Days. What happens by Seudas Shlishis? By the third meal, that very deep pleasure that God had in himself, Shabbos morning, which was revealed on Shabbos morning, he shares it now and projects it outward back into the creation. So the third meal is also the meal of Atika Kadisha, but where is it shining into? It's shining outward into the sphirot, into the attributes. It's like a person who has a very deep delight, and first he quells in himself quietly, and in the afternoon, he already calls his friends together, and he has a party, and he says, I'm celebrating today. So he shares his pleasure with others. So that's it's the same pleasure, but it's projected outward. And that happens in the Seudas Shlishis, and that's what's called the meal of the Ze'er Anpin, which are already the emotions. Hashem is sharing that pleasure with us. These are the three levels. So now he's going to connect this to Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, these three meals. Okay. The Sasuda Echad, the first meal, Bilel Shabbos, is in the night of Shabbos. The Chakal Tapuchen is from the apple orchard. The Mizbarcha that becomes blessed, Mepchenes Atika from Atik. Vagam Shemavur Lamaila. And even though we explained earlier, Shuhu Al Yedei Pchenes Aliyah, it's through an elevation. So his question, and why is he asking that question? It's, we know the difference between Avraham and Yitzhak is that Yitzhak is upward energy, inwardness, and Avraham is kindness. Kindness is a flow downward, is a downward flow. So if that's the case, how can it be that Friday night, which is an upward energy, should be associated with Avraham, who is a more of a projecting energy, and more of a kindness flowing from higher to lower? How can Friday night, which is the return, the moving out of creation into the higher levels of, how can that be an Avram energy? It has to be it would seem more to belong to Yitzchak. So he explains. And even we explained earlier, it's through an elevation. Although it's an elevation, the Malchut elevates because she exits creation. But the point is, when she is elevated and she goes out of creation and she rises upward, what does she trigger? She triggers the initial pleasure. Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. We say it Friday night in L'chadaydi. She triggers the original pleasure for that pleasure to open up outward. In other words, as Malchus rises, the Atika Kadisha descends to meet her. So she's rising upward with the project. She's bringing along her beautiful painting. As she's bringing it along up to God, the pleasure of Hashem that sent her out to build it in the first place is now released outward to meet her and to fill her project with pleasure. And fill her with pleasure and her project with pleasure, which is all of creation. So therefore, although it's Friday night as an elevation, the Aliyah is meant to trigger a descent, an illumination, an opening of the Ein Sof. As he says, Dahainu, what does that mean? She'oyer ha-Kesser, the light of the crown, who me'er, illuminates, v'nigla b'malchus, reveals itself in malchus. V'zeu she'amar, and that's why it says, the chakal tapuchin, that the apple orchard, which is malchus, mizbarcha gets blessed. What's a blessing? A blessing is always a download. The lights of Kesser are downloading into Malchus. So she's rising, that's for sure. It says Malchus rises into Chachma. But Kesser now, when Malchus arrives in Chachma, Kesser illuminates into her and fills her with pleasure and delight. V'zeu b'chenes Avraham, and that's what Avraham is. Shu oyer chesed. He's the light of chesed. But in our case, it's not the emotion of, it's not Avraham Avinu as he is in Atzilus, which is the light, the emotion of chesed. It's the chesed of Atik Yomin. It's Avraham as he is in Kesser is now projecting into Malchus. Shanigla b'Malchus, that is revealed. It's the kindness of pleasure. What does the kindness of pleasure mean? It's the ability of pleasure to expand outward and to expand into the essence of a person's pleasure is very inward. The fact that it expands into a project and into this and into that is the kindness of the pleasure, the diffusion of it, the opening of it. So the chesed of the Atik Yomin meets the Malchus. Maybe that's the meaning, L'cha Dodi. Dodi is the chesed, my beloved. Likras Kala, you go towards the bride. She is coming up and he is descending to greet her and fill her with, he's basically quelling in what she's bringing to him. So now he's projecting his pleasure into her, into the Shechina, into Malchus. So it's Avram coming to meet his daughter, or Avram coming to meet his wife, that kind of thing. V'zeu b'chenes Avram, yeah. Ubesuda habeis, but the second meal, what happens the second meal? Second meal is a very, very, very inwardness. Because what did we say happens the next morning? You're not projecting your pleasure into the project. you just feel deeply self-satisfied within yourself. It's even the pleasure that you have in this project is now rising to touch the essence of pleasure, where the pleasure is just, and we learned earlier, it's called when the king delights in himself. He's not delighting in something, he's just he's feeling good about himself. So that's very, very inward. So that's Yitzhak, because Yitzhak is inwardness. That's the energy of Gevura. It's a returning energy inward. It's an element of Gevura, of intensity, Histalkus and departure. This is the elevation. The supernal delight that's called Atik Yoimin. Where does it rise? Into the very quintessence of the simple pleasure. Because we learned earlier, the pleasure of a project is not called simple pleasure. Because the pleasure is defined already to be, I have a pleasure in building a house. I have a pleasure in going on a vacation. I have a pleasure in starting my own startup company. I have a pleasure. So once the pleasure is defining itself into a certain project, it's already not the simple pleasure. But where does it come from? It comes from a deeper level of pleasure, which is just undefined. It's just pleasure in existing. It's the pleasure of the essence. So Shabbos day, the pleasure of the project in our course, the pleasure that God has in creation retracts and goes into the pleasure of God just delighting in himself. That's the deeper level of Shabbos. And that's a Yitzhak experience, because it's an inward experience. Kanal. Vasuda HaGimel, it's almost like the second Shabbos meal is the most abstract meal. Vasuda HaGimel, and the third meal, Hubchinas, what did we say? That feeling that God feels good about himself, he projects that to us. He delights, he sends that quintessential pleasure to be felt in all of it, that should vibrate in all of creation. So that is Yaakov. He says, Vasuda Gimel Ubchenes Yeridas, it's descending. Or Atzmos Atainog, the light of which pleasure? Of the essence of the pleasure. But where is it illuminating to? Bize'er Anpin, into the Zah. Zah stands for Ze'er Anpin. Into the Ze'er Anpin. The Nikran, it's called Nachlas Yaakov. Nachal also means a river, a stream. It's the stream of Yaakov, because it's streaming downward into the emotions. And this is what the Zohar means. That's what Rabbi Yossi says. The Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov klilin behu. That Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov are all included in the Shabbos, in the 3 Shabbos meals. One meal for Avraham. In the 3 Shabbos meals, each of our forefathers, each of these 3 energies are highlighted, are participating, every single one. And that's why by the final prayer of Shabbos, which is the Mincha, Shabbos afternoon, we say, Avraham Yagel, Avram should delight. Yitzchak Yeranen, Yitzchak shall sing. Yaakov Ubanav, Yaakov and his sons, Yanuchu Bo, will rest in it. Why do we mention our 3 fathers? Because now that it's the Mincha, we have all 3 of our fathers, of Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, participating in the Shabbos. Avram is what? The evening of Shabbos, Shabbos Eve, Friday night. Yitzchak Yerane, and Yitzchak will sing. Singing is always an upward motion. So B'chinas Allah, it's an elevation, lihikalel, to become absorbed, ba'oinega atzmi, in the essential pleasure, b'yoyma de Shabbata, in the day meal. Yaakov of Yanuchuba, Yaakov and his sons will rest. Hainu b'suda ha'gimel, this is in the 3rd meal. V'chein yisparish, and we will also now understand also the mincha davening. We say 3 descriptions about the rest of Shabbos. We say menuchas ava unadava. It's a resting of love and graciousness. Menuchas emes ve'emuna. It's a menucha. It's a rest of truth and faith. Menucha shalema. It's a complete menucha sha'ata rotzaba, that you want. What are these three menuchas that we say? It's corresponding to these three dimensions of Shabbos. Menuchas avo nedava, the menucha of love and graciousness is that's the energy of kindness. That's Avraham. Chesed Avraham. Chesed is both love, and Chesed is also nedava. When you give a donation, it's called a nedava. It's graciousness. Menuchas emes ve'emuna, the menucha of truth and faith, is b'bchinas gevuras the Yitzhak, are related more to the gevura, because people that are very true are very demanding. It's always gevura is much more about. Chesed can give you whether it's true or not true. We'll let you pass. But menucha, but truth is demanding. Gevura, it's discipline. As gevuras the Yitzhak, these are the gevuras of Yitzhak. Menucha shalom v'shalva. Oh, then it says, I'm sorry, not menucha. Menucha shalom v'shalva, a resting of peace and tranquility. Before I said menucha sha'ataroitzeba, I skipped one. Menucha shalom v'shalva, that's Yaakov. B'chinas kava emtzai, the Yaakov. It's the middle bar of Yaakov, Tiferes, which is called Shalom, because it makes peace between Chesed and Gevura. And it's Shalva, tranquility, like it says particularly by Yaakov. It says, Bikesh Yaakov leishev b'shalva, that Yaakov wanted to sit in tranquility. Because Shalva belongs to the middle bar, which is Yaakov. Vatam shenikra, and over there we say, Menuchas Shalom v'shalva, Hashket. Hashket means silent. There's no disturbance. Ubetach, and security. We sit in peace and silence and security. What does that mean? That means we don't have to be afraid of any attack. When you're afraid of an attack, you're not secure. You're nervous. You have to put guards. But what did we say earlier? That Shabbos is, the holiness of Shabbos can never be usurped. It's a sign that God makes between Jews and between God and the Jewish people, and no one can hack that seal. No one can get in there. So you're so secure, you don't have to worry that someone will steal from you. Both spiritually, physically, Shabbos is very protected. Because the judgments do not have any yanika from where? In general from Shabbos, but primarily from the mincha of Shabbos, because that's Yaakov. And we know that Yaakov, very interesting, even though we said earlier that Abraham and Isaac, Avraham and Yitzhak had both children that were troublemakers, but Yaakov, all his sons were tzaddikim. Because since Chesed and Gevura are extremes, from extremism, you can always go in a dark place. Extremism always has a leakage. But if you stay balanced in the middle, which is Yaakov Tiferes, that is always protected. Mekava Emtzai from the middle. It explained elsewhere why Yaakov is the most protected zone. The Dafkem Avraham Yatza Yishmael. And from Abraham can come out Yishmael. And from Yitzchak can come out Esav. But not from Yaakov, the Dailamev. Upidish. And then the Zohar said, so Rabbi Yossi said, whoever doesn't complete the meals of Shabbos, woe to him. Because can you imagine? These are the meals of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov are all included in it. And then he says, the kulu, and all these meals are chadu al chadu, are a joy above a joy. Why is he saying it's a joy above a joy? Because what's revealed on Shabbos? The crown, the level of Kesser, which is pleasure. And when you experience pleasure, it's not just joy, it's a joy of a joy. I think could be, doesn't explain why. But I'm thinking is because Bina is already called joy. Eim abanim semecha, simchas yomtiv. Yomtiv is also joyous. Because it's Bina. Bina, there's joy. But the reason why Bina is joyous is because there is a touch of pleasure of Kesser that flows in Bina. And that's what gives joy into Bina. But that's only a ray of Kesser. When you go up to Shabbos, which Shabbos is the Gilui, the revelation of Kesser itself, so it's not just joy, it's joy of joy. Because it's not just Bina, it's Kesser, which is from where Bina takes from. So it's not just a simcha, it's a double-decker simcha. It's a joy of a joy. Shakol gimel madrega is the gimel seudas. All three levels of the three meals, hanal hakol hu b'pchenas haKesser. Everything is evolving Kesser. Even though the first meal is primarily malchus, but why is but Malchus rises in Atika Kadisha. That's why by every meal, Atika Kadisha is present. Malchus rises in Atika Kadisha. The second meal is Atika Kadisha Shebek Atika. It's purely Atika Kadisha. The third meal is Atika Kadisha shines in Ze'er Anpin, which again, it's all Kesser. Kesser is and therefore it's the joy of joy. And because the judgments do not have any yenika, any nursing on Shabbos, that's why the Zohar concludes over here. But what is the last words we said in the paragraph? Mehem nusa shleimasa mikol sitrai. It's a complete faith from all sides. What that means is it's complete without any blemishes. Nothing can get in there. Perfect with utter perfection. Tani, now we continue and we say, the Zohar continues and says, in this day, the fathers become crowned. Our fathers get crowned with a crown. The chol banin, and all children, yankin. But the children also get nursed. The fathers get crowns, and the children, and all the children are nursing. Madaloi have a kain b'kol shar chagenu zimnin, which doesn't happen in any other yontiv and any other time. In other words, the amount of crowning and nursing that goes through all the sefirot and everything, it's in in a manner that never happens in any yontiv or in any other time. So it makes us so privileged that we have Shabbos every 7 days. Ba'adein yoima, on this day, kol dinin iskafian, all judgments become subdued. The chayava de gehenim neichen, and even the wicked that are in Gehenim, in purgatory, rest on this day. Even they get a day off. The fires of Gehenim are shut down on Shabbos. So which means that there's no judgments at all, that even in Gehenim, even in purgatory, there's no judgment. It's a Shabbos break. So he's going to explain what this means. First of all, who are these fathers now that become crowned? So we would think it's Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. No, it's not that. Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov are the emotions, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes. Fathers, when we say over here, is Chachma and Bina. They're called fathers. Even though Chachma is father, it means parents, which include father and mother. When it means that the fathers are crowned, means that Chachma and Bina are illuminated with the light of Kesser, which is the crown. That means the pleasure saturates the mochin. The mind, the intelligence of God becomes saturated with the lights of pleasure, which are the lights of Kesser, which is much higher than the Chachma and Bina. And obviously, what does it do to Chachma and Bina? It fires up when a person experiences pleasure in their mind. Then they get a million. Then the mind exponentially explodes with brilliant light. You understand things better when the pleasure is sharp. When you have pleasure in your head, everything is a person's cognitive abilities are become enormously more powerful, because pleasure is the essence of the soul. So when the essence of the soul is flowing into a certain power of the soul, which is the intellect and the emotions, especially the intellect, it's saturated with such light. That's why we were learning that there is a river of Gan Eden, and the reason why Eden, which is Chachma, is called Eden, is mainly on Shabbos. That's why all neshamas rise to the higher Gan Eden, because since there's so much pleasure in Eden, it flows into the river, and the river flows into the Gan, into the garden, and therefore there is, in Gan Eden, the souls become abundantly enlightened with the highest levels of divine pleasure, which comes from the Maimarim that are set in Gan Eden on Shabbos. That's why our Chabad Rebbeim would say a Maimar on Shabbos, not during the week, usually, because there is There's downloads of Kesser energy, which cause such revelation and illumination. So now he explains, Pidish, Avon, Hemchines, Chachma Bina. Fathers, they're Chachma Bina. Today in Re'en, they're called two friends that never separate. Shenikra Avay Sa'olam, they're called the fathers of the world. The Atzilus, they're called the fathers of the world of Atzilus, Ki Yidu, as it is known. Umis'atrin Avon, and the fathers become crowned. Hainu b'b'chines Ateres HaKesser. That's the crown of Kesser. Lefi Sha'ares HaKesser Humeir Ba'ava Be'ima B'Shabbos. Because on Shabbos, the illumination of Kesser is shining into Chachma Bina. Ulakach b'chines Moichen Da'aba Ve'ima B'Shabbos. And that's the reason why that doesn't only mean that there is pleasure in the head, it means the quality of the mochen becomes so much greater. The intellect becomes so much sharper, and the creativity of the mind, basically the mind is on steroids on Shabbos. Hashem's mind. And what does that do? It creates, that's why on Shabbos you can also, if you study Torah, you can have so much greater illumination because everything is charged on Shabbos with a much deeper energy. And that's the reason why the mochen of father and mother on Shabbos, who b'mayla madregi Seder b'Shabbos, is in a much higher level on Shabbos, mibechoil, from in the weekday. And even more v'gam b'yamtiv, and even more than in yamtiv. Because in yamtiv, the Kesser is not shining as powerfully into the mochen like it's flying, because Shabbos is a day of pleasure, and pleasure is Kesser. The whole. And then it says, and all the children are nursing. What does that mean? If Chachma and Bina become what? Crowned with the crown. If Kesser drops into Chachma and Bina, so the more Chachma and Bina, the more powerful the emotions will be. The emotions are called the children. They're nursing from this incredible revelation. The Chol Binin, and all the children, Hainu B'chines Vav Ktsav, is the Ze'er Anpin, the 6 directions of the Ze'er Anpin. Gam Kein Yonkin, they're also nursing Memoichen El Yoinim Yoiser, from much higher mochen. B'Shabbos, on Shabbos, B'Bishar Zimnim, from any other time. Metama Niskaleel, for the reason that we said earlier, the B'Shabbos Nemar, because on Shabbos it says, Oishi Beini, it is a sign, Beini Ubein, it is a sign between me. It means that Shabbos there's such a infusion of mochen like we learned earlier. Ba'dein yoim, on this day, chayav de Gehenim neichen, those sinners that are in Gehenim have a day off. Gam kein, nevur atam lamarlo, we explained earlier, mishim de b'Shabbos ub'chines mochen da'aba dafka. Shabbos, the illumination is in Chachma, it's the mochen of Father. She'ein misham shayrish v'yanika klal ledinim. There is no root, and there is no. This goes back to an earlier idea that we learned, that from where there is Chachma, where Chachma shines, there's no judgments. So since there's no judgments, it affects even Gehenim. There's no judgments. Ladin v'day l'mevin. Okay. Then it says in the Zohar further, Ba'dein yoim, on this day, Oiraisa misatra. This is Gavald. The Torah also becomes crowned. So a lot of shuls, when they take out the Sefer Torah during the weekday, we read every Monday and Thursday. So most shuls, when they take out the Torah on a Monday and on Thursday, they don't put on the crown. Just take out the Torah and you're lame. On Shabbos, we dress the Torah with a crown. So sometimes I thought, maybe it's not right. Maybe every time we take it, just because you're in a rush, you're going to put the crown on. So, but I think even by the Rabbi, for instance, when they brought the Torah out in 7-7, they told them, I don't think they took the crown out. On Shabbos, you put the crown. But that reflects, now we understand, because the Zohar says that on Shabbos, the Torah itself gets a crown. The Torah gets crowned. Be'itrin shleimin, with perfect crowns. So what does that mean? So he's going to explain two things. What does it mean the Torah gets crowned? And what does it mean with perfect crowns? So he says like this, Pidish, Atara, whenever we say crown, hula oilam b'pchenas ha-Kesser. Crown is always, the idea of Atara is always Kesser, because Kesser is called crown. Lefisha Kesser uloshin kaiseres, because The word Kesser comes from the word koteres umakif. Koteres means what goes around. So the lights of Kesser is an encompassing energy, a soviv kalalman energy, an encompassing energy, kidu as it is known. But over here it doesn't just say with a crown. So that's a regular crown. What does it mean, be'itrin shleimen, with a perfect crown? Umasha kasa be'itrin shleimen dafka, with a perfect crown. Mashma. That seems to imply sheyesh itrin she'enan shleimen, that there are crowns that are not perfect. And this is a perfect crown. So in the idea is, the fisha yeduah, it is known, shebchenas ha-kesser u'bebchenas memutza. It is known that Kesser serves as an intermediary between atzmis hamatzal, between the essence of the emanator, l'netzalim, to the emanations. Let me explain quickly. What's the function of Keter? So we know like this. Hashem projects 10 sefirot, 10 attributes through which he channels and expresses himself to the world. But these attributes are attributes, which means they have already specific definitions. Like kindness, severity, compassion, wisdom, understanding, they have character. The Or Ein Sof, God himself, is above all definitions whatsoever, above all description. And from him emanate these definitions. But because he is utterly definitionless, and the Sefirot have character and definition, so how do they communicate? How is there... You can't go from nothing to something. So there has to be some mediator. So Kesser serves as the Or Ein. What's Kesser? Kesser is the same Or Ein Sof, the same infinite light, but it dropped down already. The Or Ein Sof kind of bending down to become a source for Sefirot. So even though Kesser is not yet Sefirot, but it's a source for Sefirot. The Or Ein Sof that's higher than Kesser is not even a source for Sefirot. Since Kesser is a source for Sefirot, he's going to say, in a hidden, subtle way, there is already a beginning of the Sefirot in Kesser. Now, but watch this. When Kesser energy usually flows to the Sefirot, to Chachma Bina Das, it's only the lowest element of Kesser that infuses them. The Malchus of Kesser, the kingship of Kesser, becomes the batteries or the influence that goes from. We're going to learn the same thing on the Moshiach, in the Moshiach Maayon that I'm going to teach tonight. It's only the Malchus of Kesser. You're wondering, is there another class till tonight? Yeah, we finish this, we do another class. I have a 5-minute class that I do every day when I'm 3/4 asleep already. Like this is like really late when I'm almost, and then I remember I didn't do the Moshiach class. I do go ahead and do it. So it's not Moshiach Matters, that I have a class that we gave for many years called Moshiach Matters, but there is a class that's called the Daily Moshiach Maayon. It's a 5-minute. We send it out on WhatsApp. You can subscribe to that. In any case, so tonight's class is going to have this point in it as well. The way Keter gives life to all the Sefirot, they all derive energy from Kesser, but usually they're getting only the Malchus of Kesser, which is the nethermost lowest element of Kesser, is what Kesser is directing downward into the Sefirot. The general energies of Kesser are transcendent. However, there are special days like Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, Purim, Rosh Hashanah, different holidays, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, where the Sefirot, the Chachma Bina, rise and they receive they get a higher grip on Kesser. Not only on the Malchus of Kesser, but for example, they can tune into the Netzach of Kesser or the Hod of Kesser. They can go higher. But even when it's going from the higher levels of Kesser, it's called deriving from Kesser, but it's not perfect Kesser. The only level that's called perfect Kesser is Kesser of the Kesser. The crown of the crown that's called the Gilgulta, the skull of Kesser, that is the perfect Kesser. And that reveals itself at Shabbos and no other time. The Kesser of the Kesser. And that's why in Shabbos it says that the Torah becomes crowned with perfect crown. The perfect crown is when there is in his galus a revelation of the crown of the crown. The level of Kesser and Kesser that is shining in Chachma and Bina, which is in the Torah, as we're going to see in a moment. Okay. We talk about these things as if we know what we're talking about. I just want you to know that we have no idea what we're talking about, but we're talking about it anyways. But one day when Moshiach will come, we'll say, so that's what was meant. That's what we were talking about. The Kesser is the medium between the essence of the emanator and the emanations. And Kesser itself incorporates within itself. Miyut spheres, Gamkein, all the 10 spheros. Kishar HaSpheres, like all the other spheros. Usually, it's the Malchus of Kesser, of the crown, who is the root and the source for the emanations, which are the Sphirot. They come from the Malchus element of Kesser. Kamoi, Chachma and Bina, like even Chachma and Bina. What does Chachma and Bina nibble from? Where does Chachma and Bina getting its energy? From the Malchus of Kesser. The Chsiv, like it says, where do you see that? That Chachma, Maayon timatze. Chachma receives from nothingness. One of the interpretations means that Chachma is only receiving from a nothing of Kesser. Kesser is not contributing to Chachma something big. Kesser is throwing to Chachma a non-entity. Malchus is considered nothing compared to Kesser. So what Kesser is giving to Chachma is from its own Malchus, which is considered the nothing of Kesser. In other words, Kesser is diluting its energy to total nothingness, and from its nothingness, it's feeding Chachma. It's downgrading its powerful, infinite Ein Sof light to absolute nothing. And the nothing of Kesser is what Chachma is eating from, or nursing from, and giving all the vitality to Chachma. Because if Kesser would give more light to Chachma, it would electrocute Chachma. Okay, it would be a power surge. So it has to dilute it to literally nothing, and from the nothing, that's the Malchus that usually feeds into. Comes out that the Chachma of Atzilus is being yonek, is nursing, rak mepchinas Malchus shebekesser, only from the crown element of Kesser. The Hainu, what does that mean? Mipchinas Chachma shebemalchus zeh. The Chachma of Atzilus is receiving from Malchus of Kesser. But it gets really tricky, Kabbalah. The Malchus of Kesser has also 10 spheres in her. So the Chachma in the Malchus, in Kesser, is feeding the Chachma of Atzilus. The Bina of Atzilus is receiving her vitality from the Bina of the Malchus of Kesser. Each sphera is plugging in only to Malchus, which is the tail end, but in the Malchus of Kesser, there is Chachma, Bina, Das, so each sphera is receiving its vitality from that particular nuance in the Malchus of the Kesser. Okay. So is in all the details of the 10 spheres of Atzilus. That's a regular day, a regular Tuesday, a regular Wednesday. That's the way energy flows from the Ein Sof to Kesser, from Kesser to Atzilus, only through the Malchus, which is the nothing of it that passes on. There are times that God gives the world a gift. There are times that Hashem opens up the channel and allows a little glimmer more of the Ein Sof to reveal itself in Chacham. When is that? On special heightened days. Miskalim b'chinas nihide Kesser. There are times that the Netzach Hod Yisod of Kesser reveal themselves in Chachma. Biyut Spheres, that's not only in Chachma. In all the 10 spheres of Atzilus, they're privy to receive not just from the Malchus, but from the Netzach Hod Yisod of Kesser, which is exponentially higher than Malchus. of Kesser. And their illuminance is much higher. It's much higher than what Malchus was contributing. The Malchus of Kesser was contributing until now to the Netzalim, to the emanations. As it says in Zohar on the pasuk of Netzach Yisroel, Shu Pchinas Netzach the Erech Anpin, which is the Netzach of Erech Anpin, is Erech Anpin is another name for Kesser, the long phase. Sometimes the Yisod of Erech Anpin shines in Chachma. Shenikra, it's called Ubetuvay Hagadol, and in his great goodness, like we say in benching, Ubetuvay Hagadol Imanu Tamid Loy Chasar, we're never lacking. We say Ubetuvay Hagadol. What's Ubetuvay Hagadol? Yisod is called Tov. The element of Yisod is called Tov. We're going to talk more about Yisod soon. But the element of Yisod is called Tov. Because Yisod is always the mashpia, the giver. There's 5 emotions. The 5 emotions are funneled to Yisod. Yisod is the element of bonding. And therefore the Yisod is the mashpia, the influencer bonding to the recipient. And that's the goodness to give. So Yisod is called Tov. Regular Yisod is called Tov, like Tov Hashem Lakol. Right? That's regular Yisod. The Tov, the Yisod of Kesser is called Tuvo Hagadol, his great Tov. That's called the Yisod of Kesser. So there are times that we merit not just to receive from Tov, but to receive Tuvay Hagadol, the great Tov. Yisod of Kesser, from where our new building is coming from. As you will soon see. It's not coming from the regular level of Yisod. It's coming from Yisod of Atik Yom. I'm telling you. Just wait and see. But that's called the Tuvay Hagadol in the great Tov. And when that happens, that the worlds are illuminated from Tuvay Hagadol, that's much higher than when it comes from Malchus. And sometimes, Yesh Yoiser Aliyah, there's even a higher elevation. What? Shemeir b'netzalim, in the Sfirot of Atzilus, what's illuminating? B'chenes chagas the Erech Anpin, the Chesed Gevurah Teferes of Erech Anpin. That's more inward. See, again, we know the Partzuf. Malchus is the feet, and the lowest, and then there is Netzachod Yisod, the thighs or the higher. Then there is the Chesed Gevurah Teferes, which is already associated with the higher part of the body, which is much more inward, and then there is Chabad. So in Kesser itself, you have all these levels. Usually Hashem is only influencing the worlds with the Malchus of Kesser that's flowing into the 10 spheres. There are times that he says that Netzach Hod Yisod reveals itself. And then there is even times that the Chesed Gevurah Teferes of Kesser reveals itself. And they're called Yad HaGedola, Hayad, the hand of Hashem, but Yad HaGedola, the great hand. Anything that has to do with Kesser is mega, is big. Kesser is Ein Sof, is big. Yad HaGedola, the great hand, is the Chesed of Kesser. Yad HaChazaka, the strong arm, that's the Gevurah of Kesser. Can you do as it is known? And at times, Yesh Yoiser Aliyah. Sometimes we have even a higher revelation. Shemeir b'chinas Chabad shebe Erech Anpin. That the Chabad of Kesser is shining into the 10 spheres. Then it's off the charts great. However, he says, Hine kol zeh, all of this, Einoi nikra b'chinas atarin shleimin. All of this, it's not called perfect crowns. Because it's the lower spheroids of the crown. Ki itrin ashleimin. You know what the perfect crowns are? Hainu davke b'chinas Kesser shebe Kesser. When the crown of the crown reveals itself, that's called perfect crowns. Because it's perfect in the crown itself. Because since crown is Kesser, if you're dealing with the foot of Kesser, that's not completely Kesser. Completely Kesser is when the only thing you can say about it is that it's Kesser. There's nothing there other than Kesser. So that has to be the Kesser of the Kesser. So when Kesser shears the Kesser element of the Keter, then it's called Itrin Shleiman. That's called complete crown. When does that reveal itself? On Shabbos. Because Kesser also includes 10 spheres, like we've been saying. Ubchenas Kesser, Shebe Kesser, the crown of the crown, Shaboy, Nikra, that's called Galgalta de Erechanpin. That's called the skull of it. Just like the skull is above the brain, above the Chabad, it's the Kesser of the Kesser. Who Nikra Tada Shlema Dafka. That's called the complete crown. The reason for that is because that's considered the essence of the emanator. That's not any why. What did we say? What's the function of Kesser? To serve as a mediator, to slow things down from the Or Ein Sof to the Spheros. Where does the modification and the adjustment start? When Kesser is producing the Chachma of Kesser. Because that's where Kesser is already modifying to the emanations. From Chachma and downward. But the Kesser of the Kesser is Kesser as it is still above the sphere. So the Kesser of the Kesser is still considered just pure emanator. It's not yet the source of emanations at all. Because the emanations are the spheres. That starts from Chachma. So the Kesser of the Kesser is the Kesser as it is for itself, which is really still Or Ein Sof, pure Or Ein Sof. Pure infinite light as it purely is for itself. And since, but watch this, even the Kesser of the Kesser has 10 spheres. But each of these spheres is called perfect crown. Because it's all part of the crown of the crown. But that's why it's called perfect crowns. He's bothered by the plural. He wants to explain the plural. If this is only one level, it's the perfect crown. So it should say in the Zohar, perfect crown. Why does it say perfect crowns? Because even this level includes 10 spheros, but on this level, each of these crowns, each of these spheros are called perfect crowns. Because they're Kesser of Kesser. It's the Chachma of Kesser. It's the Bina of Kesser, and all the way to the Malchus of Kesser. But even the Malchus of Kesser is called perfect crown, because it's Kesser of Kesser. Eliyos Kigami Kolomiyot Spheres includes 10 spheres. Al Kain Omar Itrin Shleiman, complete crowns. Lashon Rabim in the plural. Because everything that's in the Kesser Shebekesser, Nikra Itrin, is called crown, Shehen Shleiman, that are perfect. Lefishen Shleiman, because they are perfect. B'bchenes Shleimusa dekula, from the perfection of everything. Sheyiyah b'chenes atzmas Or Ein Sof, because why? Because this is the essence of the Or Ein Sof, who is perfect with utter perfection. Ki yadu, as it is known, b'dai l'mevin, and is enough to those who understand. Now we understand what it says in the Zohar. Ba'adein yoima, on this day, oiraisa misatra. The Torah becomes crowned with perfect crown. What does that mean? What is Pirish oiraisa? What is the Torah? Torah hu pchenes chachma d'Atzilus. The chachma of Atzilus is the Torah. Where does the Torah come from? It comes from Hashem's wisdom, from chachma. Now there's two parts to Torah. There's the written Torah and there's the oral Torah. So the written Torah comes from Chachma of Atzilus. The oral Torah, Torah Sheba'al Peh, comes from Bina of Atzilus. And since we said earlier that what happens on Shabbos, that Chachma and Bina become infused with the light of Kesser. We said earlier that the fathers, remember we said the word fathers become crowned, which fathers meant Chachma and Bina, get illuminated with light of Kesser. That means the Torah, which is the Torah Shebeksav, and the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the written Torah and the oral Torah that means when you read Torah on Shabbos, you're not reading the same Torah that you're reading during the week. The same pasuk is limited during the week compared to the expansive flow of energy that's flowing in the same chumash that you're learning on Shabbos. It's off the charts. Because the lights of Kesser are shining, but where the lights of Kesser of the Kesser, which means the essence of the emanator, is in those words on Shabbos. So never think that, I learned it during the week. I can't learn the pasuk again on Shabbos. You should relearn your whole chitas on Shabbos. What you learned. I'm not making anybody ideas. I don't want Ariella to take new things. Pirish Araiso Pchenes Chachma Datzilus. Araisa is the Chachma of Atzilus. Torah Datzilus Mulubeshes, but the Torah of Atzilus is enclosed in it. Atzilus in Atzilus Kidu as is known. The Yidur is known. The base Torah Shebeksav, the two Torahs that there is. What? Shebeksav, the written Torah, Vishabal Peh, and the oral Torah. Hemalubashim, they are enclosed. B'Pchenes Chachma Bina Datzilus. In the Chachma and Bina of Atzilus. It's interesting. It applies over here that Torah is higher than Chachma and Bina. It's enclosed in Chachma and Bina of Atzilus. Okay, it's enclosed. But there is the enclosement of it during the week. And then there is what shines in it on Shabbos. Shenikra, they're called Sefer Vesipor. The book and the story. V'amnam, that's Chachma and Bina. V'amnam b'Shabbos, but on Shabbos, Oiraisa, the Torah. V'Torah shebaksav, v'Torah shebapeh. Both the Torahs. The written Torah and the oral Torah. Shemalubashim b'Chachma Bina d'Atzilus. That are enclosed in Chachma and Bina d'Atzilus. Einam bis'atrin ba'atarois t'b'chenes ha'Kesser. They do not become crowned with the crowns of Kesser, shu makar lenetzalim tamid, which is the source of the emanations all the time. Because that you have on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. That Torah has an element of crown. You look in the Torah, you see the letters have crowns. So there's an element of crown shining there all week long, all the time. But that's the lower elements of Kesser, which, as we discussed earlier, usually the Malchus of the Kesser, sometimes the Netzachod Yisod of Kesser, sometimes the Chesed Gevurat Teferes of Kesser, sometimes even the Chabad of Kesser. But they're not called Atar and Shleiman, they're not called perfect crowns. Eloi Raisa Misatra, the Torah becomes crowned b'Shabbos on Shabbos, b'Itarin Ashleimun Dafka, with the perfect crowns. Shu Pchenes Yud Sfira Shebekesser Shebekesser, which is the 10 spheros of Kesser of the crown of the crown. Keniskaliel, like we said earlier. And this is the reason why, really, the Torah of Shabbos doesn't have words. Shabbos, the Torah, is a song. Shabbos, the Torah, is not words. I just dropped the biggest bomb over here from the night. You heard what I just said? I didn't say it. Shabbos, the Torah, is not words. There's no letters in the Torah. There's just a song. That's why the Arizal, that Gemara says that with great difficulty, the sages permitted us to speak Torah on Shabbos, which is a phenomenal statement. With great difficulty, the sages would rather have forbidden us talking even Torah on Shabbos. So the Arizal says, what else should we do if you can't talk Torah on Shabbos? Forget about no Lashon Hara, right? And no narishkeit, no weekly things. So what should you talk? Torah. No, really the sages didn't want you to talk Torah on Shabbos. So what then? They wanted you. So the Arizal says, what should you do on Shabbos? Just sing. The entire Shabbos is supposed to be a song. Just singing. Nigunim. Without words. Just nigunim. Why? So does that mean no Torah? How can we shut out the Torah? No. Yes, Torah. But the Torah, as the Torah, is higher than words. As the Torah is God's pleasure. Because that's where the Torah rises on Shabbos. Into Pnimius HaKesser. Into the Kesser of Kesser, where there's no words there. That's beyond, that's pure silence. Like by Kriyas Yamsuf, when that was revealed, it says, you be quiet. It's silence. Atika Sheba Atika. The crown of crown. There's no talking. Sages know that we can't maintain that. So with difficulty, they allowed us to speak words of Torah. Well, with difficulty, they permitted that we should speak words of Torah and Shabbos. Where does it actually say that? 66. It's a Yerushalmi. It's a Jerusalem Talmud, where it says that statement. Even though the Torah comes from Chachma, and Chachma is a source of words. That's why Torah is so wordy, because it comes from Chachma. Chachma is a source of words. But that's when Torah comes from Chachma. But on Shabbos, the Torah is illuminated with the lights of Kesser, utterly beyond Chachma. So the words get canceled in the song. Aval b'Shabbos nis'ala oira chachma b'Torah. The light of chachma of Torah gets elevated. Be'itrin hashleimun, in the perfect crowns, the Kesser shebe Kesser, of the crown of the crown. Sheshama dibur, over there, speech, nechshav lebchinas yesh. You hear this? Speech is considered arrogance. Speech is considered like somethingness. Over here, you're lost in God's perfect, infinite, beyond definition self. How do you say? How do you talk? It's at this moment. It's just pure non-beingness in the overwhelming presence of the Ein Sof. Like it says, Ein Omer. We say this pasuk on Shabbos. Ein Omer. There's no words. There's no saying. The Ein Devarim, and there is no words. Belinish Makailam. You don't hear their voice. Pure silence. As stated elsewhere. The Da'ilim Maven. So really, Shabbos is an experience of silence or song. Ba'dein yoima, on this day, now we come to the last and final piece of this passage of the Zohar, which was very exciting to me particularly, because you'll hear something now, and you'll understand then why we were talking about this all year long this year. In my classes, I had no idea why I was talking about this, but watch this. Ba'dein yoima, on this day, Chedvesa, the joy, Visafnuka, and the delights, Ishtama, are felt. They're being heard, B'masin v'chamshin almin, in 250 worlds. Atka. In the 250 worlds are saturated with joy and with pleasure. So Piddish, to explain, what are these 250 worlds? We did a bunch of classes on 250 this year. So Piddish Masan v'chamshin almin. So Hashem always leads me, Baruch Hashem, to the right mimer. I don't know how I landed in this mimer. And finally, the last words, it's all to explain, what are these 250 worlds? Why is this number? Why is it that the light of Hashem is felt in 250 worlds? And what happened to 251? That world doesn't feel it. What's with the 250? What's the significance of the 250 worlds? Reish Nun, the 250, v'lo yoser, and not more. V'lo pachos, and not less. Not 249, not 251, 250. Here you do it as known. You got to make sure you're inside one of those 250 worlds this Shabbos. Here you do it as known. Oh, the B'chinas Yisod hu koidel ba'atzmai etzem ashpa. We know that there are like this. Malchus, let's break this down a little bit. Malchus is the source of creation. Because Malchus is God's speech. From the 10 Sefirot, Malchus is the mother of creation. Because Malchus is speech, and through speech Hashem creates. But Malchus is the woman, she's a recipient, she doesn't have anything of her own. She needs to receive from the higher Sefirot. So what drives God to talk? Just like speech. Speech is meaningless unless you put content in the speech. Speech is just words, empty vessels. You got to put something in it. What fills speech? Emotion or intellect? Either you can say intellectual words or you can say emotion, words of emotion. So when God creates the world, his emotions go into his speech. We know that there are 6 emotions above Malchus. Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yisod. Now he says, interesting, really Yisod is not an emotion on its own. There's really only 5 emotions. Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, and Hod. Yisod is the funnel that takes these emotions and funnels it to Malchus. Yisod serves just as a bridge, a connector that connects. For example, speech means I'm speaking to you, I'm speaking to someone else. Why am I talking and what am I speaking? I'm going to share with you something about myself. I'm going to convey my emotion, my connection to you. But in order to, I have to want to connect. There are people, it's interesting. There are people who have emotions, but they don't have a developed Yisod. So even when they're talking to someone or communicating with someone, They lack the ability to click with the other individual and really sense them and deliver like a message to the person that the person should hear it and get it. It's a certain art that people have. Communicators, that's what a communicator really is. That's what a good teacher is. A good teacher is someone who can lock brains with the student and really sense the student and deliver to the recipient as they need it, what they need, and kind of bond with the mind of the student. That's called Yisod. Yisod is bonding. But the bonding is not just for the sake. The bonding is not meant the bonding. It's taking the content and then using the bonding to convey and to bring it through. So he's going to explain that Yisod is made up of Yisod produces 250. The number of 250 is related to Yisod. Why? Because Yisod is transmitting the 5 emotions: Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisod. And they're called the 5 Chasadim, 5 powers of Chesed. Those who were on Maayon Yisroel last year know that the entire year we were talking about that last year was a download of the 5 Chasadim, 5 times Tov. And all those 5 Cheseds flow into Yisod, and Yisod then transmits these 5 Cheseds down. Now, what he's going to build up over here is like this. The 5 emotions, the Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yisod. Sorry, Chesed, Gevura, Netzach, Hod, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, and Hod. Those are the 5. Each one has another 5 inside of it. Because each one, it's in Kedusha, everything is whole. So in Chesed, there's the Gevura of the Chesed. So we have to make 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25. So really the sum totality of the 5 emotions is really 25. But since every perfect number is 10, so these 25, each one has 10 components in it. So it becomes 10 times 25. 10 times 25 is 250. So there are 250 nuances that flow into Yisod. And when Yisod delivers a full package, a full transmission, it fills 250 worlds. The idea that it's filling 250 worlds is because it's channeling every element, every nuance of the five emotions, which means God is giving us everything that he has in his emotions. All of his emotions are flowing. When the number is 250, it means it's all manifest and it's all detailed and it's all expressed. Now, here's a very interesting thing. I'm giving you already the whole gist of the next piece. So in short, and then we'll read it inside because we want to. It's very interesting. When a teacher is not excited about what they're teaching, when they're not animated about what they're teaching, and they just have a Dvar Torah and they sit down and they give a Dvar Torah, so their communication will be like dry. And not only will it be dry, but it also will be that they're going to give a short, and then you ask them, say, "Oh yeah, I forgot to say this," and you ask them another, "I forgot to say that." Yeah, but when someone has pleasure in what they're teaching, then when they give over, they can't stop telling you. They say, and this and this and that. If you listen to my Monday classes recently, it's like it's like 1,000. Why? Because I'm so filled with pleasure of Moshiach that I go crazy, and I don't want you to hear anything less than everything. Because when you're filled with pleasure, then what it does is it brings expansiveness. And then every detail, because a lot of times you could control yourself and give over things very condensed and very short. And there's a quality to that. Because when people are ADD and they can't come to Thursday night class for 3.5 hours, so people today's days, you get 5 minutes you have. That's it. You have to give over everything 5 minutes. You spoke for 5.5 seconds, you're off. Everything is shorts. Okay, so in that kind of giving, yeah, there's a certain quality in being able to concentrate and short. But when the teacher is filled with pleasure, they will not going to give a short teaching. Then they're going to expand and elaborate. So when is Yisod going to pump it out to 250 worlds, which means going to give every nuance in the hashpa only when the emotions are saturated with Kesser of Kesser. When the pleasure of Hashem, when the Ein Sof is flowing in, it causes such pleasure and delight in the supernal man above, in God's attributes of man, that when he's transmitting through Yisod, he's transmitting with all expansionists, you're going to have 250 worlds. That's the idea of where he says is the secret of these 200. Dafka on Shabbos, it's vibrating because the rest of the week, the rest of the time, when Shabbos, when the divine man above is not filled with pleasure, everything shrinks, and when God talks, he's going to talk, he's going to give you over, but it's going to be like very short sentences. It's not going to be elaborative. It's just not going to fill 250 worlds. It's going to be like a short teaching with a lot of content, but not expanded. The ultimate expansion is 250. That's the idea that he's explaining over here. We'll read it inside. Yisod includes in itself the essence of the influence. V'nikra, and therefore Yisod is called Kenisha the Kol Nahirin. Yisod is called the ingathering of all the lights. Bavad. That's the level of Yosef. Yosef is Yisod. It says that Yosef gathered all the silver in Egypt. But Yalaket, he's I once discussed this. Yisod is Amazon. It gathers, it's a big super storage house. It gathers from every manufacturer and then delivers. It's the ultimate distributor. But in order to distribute it, needs to first receive from everybody and then it delivers. That's Yisod. Everything it gathers. Because what is Yisod? Yisod is not anything else. Elo keli, it's only a vessel. V'koach, and it's a power, hamevi, that brings etzem hashpa, the essence of the influence, lidei giloi, to a revelation. U'kamoshel, unlike an example, hamalamid, a teacher. And when he says over here, he means specifically a teacher. Someone who's qualified to be a teacher. Shemazbir dvar chachma Talmud, that explains some type of wisdom, some type of understanding to a student. Sheyesh like keli. Not everybody can be a teacher. There are a lot of very brilliant people that just can't teach because they don't have a good yisod. The yisod in their neshama is not strong. So they can be a lot of people that have brilliant, and they try to give over. The students can't connect to what they're saying. They say it's very short. They say very this. They're very broken, and then their minds are flying everywhere. It's not a cohesive, strong, and then it's a certain power to connect to an audience. So he says, this malamed that teaches sheyesh like keli, he has a vessel hamuchenes that is prepared lepeula zu to this pure. It's like a person who has a pitcher or a big bucket, but he doesn't have a spigot, a faucet to deliver. Yisod is that spigot and that faucet that can take something and direct it towards an influence, towards a student. Lahamshach, to draw etzam shefa seichel, the essence of the influence of the intellect, bitzirufim shel oisiyos, into different combinations. People that have a very strong yesod are very, very good with words. They can say an idea in so many different words and so many different, like that people can understand it. Bitzirufim shel oisiyos bekama mina ifanim. They can explain something with so many different ways. Shainim. Others that don't have a strong yesod, even if they're brilliant up here, they don't have the wide range of language and words to be able to deliver things. Stated elsewhere. Bebir Inyan, and this means a lot to me. This next line, and this is what it means in the explanation. We say by Shemona Esrei, V'konei hakol, and he acquires everything. He's konei hakol. Konei hakol is through Yisod. That part of davening, it says he acquires everything, is Yisod acquires everything. That's why Yosef is the one who acquired all of Egypt for God. And our Yosef, which is our sixth Rebbe, the Chabad Rebbe Yosef Yitzhak, was the one who came to America and said, America is not any different. We're going to acquire America. And now that it's 250 years of America, that's what I'm going over here. It's that Yosef, the previous Rebbe, and remember, the Alter Rebbe was the one who's established Chassidus Chabad the same year that America was established. So and he had his eye on America, lechatchila, to make the lower part of the world into a home for God. And this and even though the Alter Rebbe started it, who actually fulfilled, who was actually the one who crossed the sea and began planting Chabad in America to uplift America? The Friediger Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzhak. And since the Friediger Rebbe was the one who gave us this new building, that's why I'm saying that. That's the one who makes the kinyan. Koine akol. He's the one who's koine everything. The kinyan, because why? In order to make a kinyan, in order to acquire something, you have to connect. You have to be able to latch on to the thing you're acquiring. It's like you acquire people by being able to connect to them. People that are connectors get a following, get a connector. So the previous Rebbe came, his name is Yosef also, like the first Yosef, who went down to Egypt and was acquired. The Konei Hakol. Shazeo B'chenes Yisod, and that's Shazeo B'chenes Yisod, Shenekra Kol. That's Yisod, that's called Kol. Why is Yisod called Kol? Because Kol is Gematria 50. 50 are also the 5 cheseds, each chesed times 10. Because Yisod receives all the chesed from chesed, all the gevura from gevura, but actually the Yisod is actually pulling the chesed from each sphera. Okay, whatever. Okay, Targum, like the Targum says on the pasuk, Ki kol b'shamayim, the achid b'shmaya ve'ara, that which holds on to heaven and earth. Koloima shemevi es hashefa, he brings the influence, min hamashpia, from the influencer, laha makabel, to the recipient. In Yedua be'etz chayim, it is known in Eitz Chayim, shebchinas hei chasadim nimshachim liyasod, that the 5 cheseds from the 5 spheres, they all go to Yisod. Da'aynu b'chinas chesed shebechesed, the chesed of chesed, u'b'chinas chesed shebegevura, and the chesed of gevura, u'b'chinas chesed shebeteferes, and the chesed of teferes, ad b'chinas chesed shebehod, up to the chesed of hod. Because these 5 chasadim, these 5 powers of kindness that come from the 5 emotions, that's a revelation of the light, of the essence, of the influence of chagas, of chesed, gevura, teferes. Ubchinas Yisod, hu rak hamakabel. Yisod has nothing original. Yisod is not an original. Yisod is just receiving from all the previous ones. He's receiving these sphere, he chasadim alalu, these 5 chasadim. Elakach nikra, and that's why it's called Kenisha the Kol Nahirin. Yisod is called the gathering of all the lights. If you also see, I spoke about this a lot last year, that the previous Rebbe is the one who created a library. He was the one who gathered from all. Also, who is the one who teaches us about the lives of all the previous Rabbeim? The previous Rebbe. He tells us all the stories. Without him, we don't know anything. He's the communicator. He's the connector. He brings everything to Umevi oisam lidei giloi, and he brings it to revelation. Bimalchus, into Malchus, hanikra dibor. He brings everything into revelation, into Malchus, which is called speech. Like it says, Ki kol b'shamayim va'aretz, that everything, he brings everything that's in Shamayim, he brings it down to Aretz. Aretz is Malchus. The 5 spheres are called Shamayim. Yisod is the mediator and the channeler who channels from Shamayim and brings it down to Aretz. By receiving the 5 chasadim, which is the word kol, which is times 50, he brings that all down into Malchus. V'dai l'meiv. Okay. V'hine, we know, kol or mehei chasadim alalu. All, you have to understand something. Where's he going with this? He wants to say, If God himself, this is the summary of the whole class today. If God himself is so filled with pleasure and delight that saturates him, how's it getting to us? Because from Hashem, it has to be transmitted to the world. That's where Yisod comes in. But the question is, how saturated is Yisod? When Yisod is supercharged, because all the spheres are supercharged with pleasure, the more then Yisod will transmit. Yisod is going to give a massive transmission, which would mean it's going to teach, he's going to spell out all the 5 chasadim in a very, very detailed way. And that's why it's going to fill all 250 chambers, which means all elements of existence, which are deriving from these 25 aspects, which are 5 times 5, as he's going to develop right now. Because the 5, all lights from these 5 chasadim, kol hey chasadim ba'atzmai. Each one includes all the 5 chasadim. Ki kol echad ve'echad kolom mekulam, because each one of them includes them all. V'nimtza yesh kan behei chasadim alalu, comes out there are in these 5 chasadim mispar chafei. The number is 25, because 5 times 5. The yadua, it is known. Shekol echad ve'echad min amidos, every single one of the midos, halalu kolol miyud, includes 10. Because there's 10. In order for something to be complete, it needs 10 sphirot. So then, imkein hare yud pamim chafei. So 10 times 25. Hare olam ema mispar hakoyle reish nun. That gives you 250. V'zeu sha'ama b'masim v'chamshin alman, and that's why it says 250 worlds. Davka. B'mispar mechuvan. That's why he chooses 250. The Zohar is not just throwing a number. The 250 worlds, masin v'chamishim etam zeh, for this reason. Yesh lava, we need to understand lama dafka b'Shabbos. So now we need to understand why only on Shabbos does it shine in the 250 worlds. Why doesn't Yisod always give to 250? Yisod is always transmitting to Malchus. So why is Yisod not regularly not shining into 250? The answer is when the teacher is not in the mood of teaching, even if they'll teach, they're going to give a lousy class. But when the teacher is filled with pleasure, then they're going to teach a 6-hour class. That's the point. It's going to flow without an end. So that's what he's saying. On Shabbos, the teacher is saturated. Yisod is flowing. And that's why he's going to elaborate and take each of these chasadim, every nuance of the emotion, and he's going to speak it in every possible way and deliver it and highlight all aspects of it. That's why Dafka and Shabbos, it's filling all 250 worlds. That's the idea. Are the shining the lights of the 5 chasadim of Yisod b'masim v'chamshin alman in 250 worlds, v'loy b'shar yoimin zulas yom Shabbos, and not in the other days, which is not Shabbos. The idea is like this. That's why he says first on this day, chedvesa v'safnuka, joy and pleasure, ishtama, is heard, in 250 worlds. What does that mean? The meaning of the teaching is like this. The implication of the teaching is like this. Shahayoim goyrim, the day itself causes the pleasure and the joy. Ishtama bereishnun oilamus, that it should be felt in the 250 worlds. V'yesh lahavin gamkein. Why? Mao inyan chezvesa v'safnuka. What does it mean, this joy and this pleasure? And why does the Shabbos cause the that this should be felt in 250 worlds? The idea is the we first have to preface. How do you get the 250 worlds from these 5 chasadim? It starts with 5 and you got the 250. Because you say, well, you make 5 times 5 and 5 times, and that times 10. Okay, but what makes 5 become 250? The answer is because these 5 chasadim are yiklulim tchilam akalaration and oilamas. First, it's like this. First, the 250 worlds are all included in the 5. What does that mean? He's going to bring a gewaldige mashal, a very good example for this. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the author of the Mishnah, taught very short and concise teachings. The Mishnah is very concise. Comes the sages of the Gemara, of the Talmud, who lived about 100, 200 years after the Mishnah, from 100 and so years until 250 years or 200 years after the Mishnah. And they debate the Mishnah and discuss the Mishnah and discuss back and forth. And they create 10 pages of Gemara from one Mishnah. Now the question is, and then they elaborate and they bring out so much beauty and so much depth and so much nuance from the words of the Mishnah. So he asked the question, did Rabbeinu HaKadosh not know, the author of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, did he not know everything that the sages after him taught? Was he not as brilliant as them? Of course he was. He gave that short 5 lines or 3 lines or 6 lines, which later are going to become 7, 8 pages of Talmud back and forth discussion. Because he was able to concentrate it all in a short teaching. Because that's what he needed to do. He could have also gave the long drushes, but he needed to give us a short and concise concentrated version of the entire Torah. He relied on the next generations that they will extrapolate it, open it up, and bring out everything that's hidden in it. So initially, as he says, now, 250 are the ultimate expression of the cosmos in its most expansive version. But where are those 250s initially embedded? In 5 sharp points of kindness. There's 5 sharp points of kindness, include in them the 250, each one, 50 worlds. 50 worlds are included in each one of these kindnesses, because each one of these kindness is the source of, it divides into 250, so each one is the source of 50 worlds. But in its origins, it's only 1 point. And then later, when you decipher it and open it up, and you travel through all of its alleys and all of its crevices and all of its highways and all of its, you find the 200 all this amazing depth that's endless in each one of these. What makes usually that expansion possible? He's going to explain, when you're joyous and you're filled with pleasure, it causes you to not keep things condensed, but to open it up. That's kind of the idea. He says, these 5 chasadim, it included Mekal Areshin and Olam. It's from the 250 worlds. Each one includes them all. The truth is, every single chesed had all 250. Because each chesed has all the other 5. And when you break them down, you get 250. Then later, these 5 chasadim become expanded to 250 worlds specifically. It's like a detail that comes out from a generalization. It's like a person sometimes says a short phrase, and then there's an entire book that opens up to, based on that one principle, let me explain what is contained in that short thing. Everything was first included in the general. But when you still had that short one-liner, all the details are there, but they're all in a concealed state. And they're not revealed. But when the details will emerge from the generalization, it will come out from concealment to revelation. And this will be understood. We'll understand this by understanding the difference that there is between the Mishnah and the Talmud. The Mishnah is taught in a very short and concise way. Gemara and the Talmud, Pirish Mishnah, is an elaboration on the Mishnah. Lafarish, to explain kol prate tamel, all the details of a reasons, ki yidua, as it is known. We can't say Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our holy teacher, which is the author of the Mishnah. Shechibur Mishnah, that was the one who authored the Mishnah. Lo yada klal. You can't say that he did not know mahatamim, the reasons, v'achidushim, and all the novel ideas, shechichu b'alei Gemara, that the members of the Talmud, the rabbis of the Talmud, were later innovated, al mishnaya shaloich shechibur, which they built on his Mishnah that he authored. It must be that he knew what they were going, but he did not elaborate on it. He gave us a short version. Elevada yada hakol, for sure he knew it all. Rakshashana Rebbe b'derech tzara b'lvad. Rebbe taught in a short way, and then later. Mishnah and the Mishnah, Soivelas bekitzer devarim. The Mishnah was written with such perfect words that every little sentence of it contained so much hidden nuance. Everything that the Gemara people are going to extrapolate from it. There's nothing new in the Talmud. The Talmud is just pulling out, unpacking what is very concentrated in the Mishnah. Everything that they explain and innovate, new details, they find it in why Rebbe used this word to teach you this, right, and all that. After you learn the Gemara, you have to go back to the Mishnah and find everything there. The Mishnah is like the general that tolerates or contains within it all the details that emerge afterwards. Like a very great man, a very, very wise man will say a very brilliant idea in very few words. He doesn't have to explain more. Because he understands things on such a high level, he just shares one short teaching. It's like the sage, it comes out and says his teaching to his students, one line, and the students in the thing sit and think 60 years. They're pondering the word of the gem of wisdom that the teacher delivered, like the guru delivered. One line, and then now they're pondering the word, this ancient Chinese whatever that was said that has all the wisdom of life in one line. And then the 60 years later, he picks his nose, he sticks his head out again and shares another thought, and that suffices for another 60 years for everybody to be busy with. That's good for himself. But if he needs to teach it and explain it to the students, it's tarach lefarish bekama deburim rabim. Then you're going to have to talk and write books and paragraphs and explain it. The ein kol chadash klal, but there's nothing really new anymore. Etzloi b'divurei b'riboy advarim alolu, with all these words. Because for himself, he sees everything that will later be elaborated in a short little phrase, which includes all the major works that are going to be explained later. So will be understood lamaila. Those 5 chasadim, the 5 powers of chesed, even after they expand and they become 250, there's nothing new. To God, who contained these 5 powers of chesed, he has all these kindnesses packaged in one powerful, potent, powerful energy of kindness. Everything was included in these 5 kindnesses. Yatzad came out, it only emerged outward, is enough to those who understand. However, till now we spoke about how there's a quality in the concentration. Now he's going to say what causes one to elaborate and not concentrate. There is nothing new in revealing the concealed. However, when the teacher is being very, very cryptic and very short-worded and very concentrated, it's going to be dark for the students. For the teacher, it's okay. But for the students, most students won't get it. Maybe the most brilliant ones will share in that one line that there is so much depth of there. For example, if we only had Mishnah, we would never know the Torah. We need the Talmud to have broken it up into the details. And the Talmud is called light, and the Mishnah is called darkness, because it's still dark. Light is revelation. Which is like an luminous light that everybody can see through it. But if you don't specify the details, in a revealed way, it's called the closed book. It's called darkness. Because it's not revealed to everybody. It remains in the essence of the influencer. The Talmud, it's like a teacher who's only is not being influencing to the student. Shagam she'ein zegrayin l'rav. It's like a teacher who doesn't teach the student, even though the teacher is not missing out anything because he knows it already. He knows it all in his mind. It's called darkness to the students. Because this light and this influence is not coming to a revelation to the receivers. It remains in a concealed state in the essence of the influence. But when the influencer is in a state of joy and in a very great pleasure, so then he becomes unplugged. Like we call these meals, Shabbos meals, unplugged. We call these classes. When the teacher is experiencing enormous joy and delight, it automatically pulls the stopper out, and the teacher starts to talk much more. And all the concealment comes to revelation, which would not be the case when he is not joyous and not in a pleasurable state, because then he can be more sequestered and more introverted. He doesn't have an enjoyment in teaching, in influencing. So then nishar ba'atzmusa, he stays in himself. When he stays inside himself, everything remains depressed in sin. Then it remains in the generality, which includes everything, but in a hidden way. For himself, he doesn't need a lot. But when it comes into revelation, then if you want to reveal it, then you need to pages and pages and pages. He will speak a lot, even though there's nothing new. And these many words, nikra oir, is called light. Shemeir begilu yoser, it's shining with greater intensity, with greater revelation. And the more words he's using, more it's being revealed, even to people that are of a less caliber. People on a lower level of intelligence can understand it if he speaks a lot of words, because he's breaking it down into small little crumbs. And so it will be understood with these 5 powers of Chesed. The Shabbos Dafka, that it's only on Shabbos, because Atik Yomin is shining in Atzilus, so the whole world of Atzilus is so saturated with pleasure. It creates pleasure and delight. Tafnuka means delight. It means the abundant kindness of Atik Yomin, the abundant expansion of Atik Yomin, of this infinite pleasure that is shining, which is the simple, essential pleasure that we discussed earlier in the second meal. Remember, we spoke about the simple pleasure. And because of it, these 5 powers of Chesed are shining from their closed, hidden state. Said that they should shine outward in a revealed way. To reveal all the details. Until it will be found. Reish Nun Olam is 250 worlds. Because each one of these 25 will be divided into 10. And each of these 10 includes 25. 10 times 25 is 250. It's only on this day. The delight and the pleasure ishtama is heard. Everything is in a full-fledged outer express state. The joy of Atik Yomin Gorem causes an added light in the essence of the Zeir. But no one should ever complain why my Shabbos talks by the Kiddush are the longest talks that any rabbi gives ever in the entire world. People think they get a small Devar Torah over here, and they get over here because it's shining into 250 worlds. Because that's the reason why. Because he can't hold himself back. It just flows from the concealed, and what was concentrated comes out into expansion. Now, like the example from the influencer, when he's in the light, that his influence shines, but in a more specified manner. Which is not the case when he's not in a joyous state. He's not mashpia, or even if he is mashpia, even if he is influencing, it's short. It's b'derech kitzara k'mo sheshayna la'atzmai. Even when he teaches, he gives a short teaching like he's teaching for himself, and no one gets it. V'day l'mev. In Ha'ara 127, I just want to say, right over here, the last Ha'ara, he adds more beer, more explanation. In Ha'ara Saran Oilamois Metzatis Galos Rav Chesed V'Zelu Shainai. And this is what he says in this mimer is also found in a different book, in Agos Harap, Reb Shin Chesed, I want to read it. Ki is chesed ve'is chesed, there's two levels of chesed. Sometimes a person does kindness. Sometimes there's a guy who's a donor, a big philanthropist. He doesn't want to contribute to something. He doesn't want to give. You asked him for money, he doesn't want to give. Finally, you pester him so much, he has a headache. I'll give. So then when he gives, but he's not investing himself. So he gives you quickly a check and leave me alone. So even if he'll give, but then if you catch his interest and he gets excited and he gets pleasure in what you're doing, then he's going to give. But not just he's going to give, he's going to make sure that he's giving for this and for that and for this and for that. It begets detail. That's the point. That's what he explains it. Sometimes you do a kindness to someone that you really don't like. So then you make it a very short-handed kindness. But if his soul is there, because he's in a tremendous state of pleasure, he's exalted with a great joy, that he wants to do kindness. Then it's called chafetz chesed. He desires kindness. Memela, the difference is going to be when he's doing the kindness from himself, with his will, with his desire. It's with a tremendous good eye, with all kinds of details. Like when someone really cares and they do a kindness, they make sure that the kindness they're doing, the person that has everything from every little detail. They have, you gave them a place to sleep on Shabbos. You made sure they have water and a cupcake and a toothbrush and a toothpaste and a slipper. It's like you really get into it to give them everything. It's not just, here you go, find your pillow and go there. So that's the thing. Or when you try to explain something to somebody, when you really like, when it's your teaching it, then when you're in a good state, then you explain it. Then you explain it with so much gusto, with so much detail. That's why in Shabbos, that's when it's a time of chafetz chesed. It's a revelation of the five cheseds are coming from such a deep, pleasurable place in God. So when he's giving with all the 250. He's giving with every nuance he's giving. He's not just giving a limited package. He's giving with all the perks. The Eberster is giving with all the perks. Chafetz chesed. Then the chasadim fill all the details. From his awesome goodness that he wants to do good to his creations, Hashem fills the world with so much infinite, boundless, and every little detail God takes care of. Even the color of your napkins, the Ibish to make sure it's beautiful napkins you have. That's too where God details the giving when he's giving on Shabbos. It's on a level that's off the charts. And that's the secret of the 250 worlds, the full gamut of expression of the kindness on all levels. L'chaim, l'chaim.